Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we doing, Colorado? Good morning, how are we doing, Colorado? I think I got your attention. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Future of Work, Maximizing Human Potential event hosted by Colorado Succeeds and the Colorado Business Roundtable. This is a timely and I think relevant topic and discussion I think we're having today, both to inspire us to think forward and to act now in the practical ways that advance business, community, and people's livelihoods. We're gathered here to convene as Colorado and national leaders to discuss issues that are impacting the workforce and exchange of ideas, as well as practical actions that can position companies and individuals for success. I'm joined here today on stage by Dave Eddy, site director with Boeing, who, by the way, we learned just in the back, we are both got our start as paper boys. That's right. Which is kind of cool. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. We're not that old, by the way. It wasn't the 50s when we were slinging papers. Dave, you're also a board member with the Colorado Business Roundtable and Colorado Succeeds. I'd love to hear, and I think the audience might benefit from hearing, why this intersection of the future of work and maximizing human potential is important to you and to Boeing.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, on behalf of the Boeing Company, I'd like to welcome all of you here. I think we're going to have a very robust discussion, presentations, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So as a executive board member for both organizations, I found that there's some unique aspects that both bring to the table from a business perspective. So a lot of times when we talk about private sector businesses, we get framed in you just care about the bottom line. And I think to that point, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, I have shareholders. We're on Wall Street. We're expected to make money. But in these two organizations, I think you'll find as you become more familiar with them, there are unique aspects of both that really provide, I guess, value and wealth back to the state of Colorado in many, many forms that many of you probably are not aware. And I'll just give a couple of quick examples for each organization. So for Colorado Succeeds, they believe that great schools are great business. And for Colorado Business Roundtable, business is a force for good. So the word business is in both organizations. Now, Colorado Succeeds really focuses on education and improving education in the state of Colorado. And a couple of their programs that I participated in, specifically the Homegrown Talent Initiative, was able to make transformational change for curriculum in rural school districts that are at all four corners of the state. We're talking about tiny school districts. Transformational change to the curriculum. I grew up in a generation where it was college for all. College degree guaranteed you a successful job, living wage. That's no longer true. For Colorado Business Roundtable, the unique aspect of that board organization and the diversity that we have across that organization covers everything from, yes, private business, nonprofits, education, and what we really do is we look out for business over the state of Colorado to make sure that equity is part of our conversation and that we highlight the things that the companies do to give back to the community, not just in the educational arena, but in health and welfare, diversity, all those type of aspects. So both organizations really provide value here in the state.
Yeah, well, and I think we can't underscore the importance of these conversations around how do we make not only our state, but more to the point, our people, more competitive. Not just in terms of attracting talent, but developing homegrown talent here in Colorado. Colorado is competing to win a regional technology and innovation hub, or tech hub designation. And despite all the headlines about AI and all that talk, people, talent really matters. Yes, as I said before, the ability to attract talent, but also that ability to look at those who are growing up right here and their ability to have the skills in this evolving market and world we live in. How do you see it, Dave?
So in my particular sector, aerospace is the Colorado is the #1 aerospace state in the nation per capita. California has more engineers, but they also have 39 million people. And so when you look at the aerospace industry, a lot of times you immediately go to education in a four-year institution. And again, I'm not up here to say that that's not important, but what we are learning, and I think a large portion of the aerospace segment who fights over the same talent here in Colorado are learning, is that kids are learning different these ways. All you have to do is talk to a software engineer or actually look at a software engineer, right? It's shorts, flip-flops, and I'm coding at 2 a.m. in the morning after I finish playing video games from 8 to 1 a.m., right? And so we've had to learn that that way of learning and the ability to get their work done can happen many different ways, much different than when I grew up, where if you weren't sitting in the seat and your manager could see you, you weren't being productive. So I think that's a unique aspect, and Colorado provides those opportunities. Coming out of COVID, I don't think we'll ever go back to full-time in the office. We just can't sell that, except maybe for our classified work, right? We haven't figured out a way to bring the cone of silence down and get on your shoe phone. All you older folks that remember Get Smart will laugh at that one. All the younger guys, go Google Get Smart. But we will be in a hybrid situation, and we found that engineers and young people can be very productive in a hybrid work environment. And so that's something that is not unique to Colorado, but I think it's going to be a real force as we look at talent and being able to take advantage of a lot of the women in the workforce, a lot of the underrepresented that still have families to take care of, still have kids to take care of. They can still contribute if we provide opportunities that they can work in a hybrid environment.
Absolutely. Dave Eddy with Boeing, so glad to have you here today to help us kick this thing off. For those who don't know me, my name is Ryan Frazier, and I'm here in my capacity as the business expert, host of the 9 News Business Brief. So we're excited to get going with you. I think we're going to have some great discussions, and I think all the more reason for us to understand the workforce trends, what's happening, and where things are headed. In order to help us frame the moment, to help us better understand the global workforce trends that matter most, Steve Hatfield, principal in Deloitte's with Deloitte's Global Future of Work Institute, will help us shine a light in this area. Steve Hatfield is a principal with Deloitte Consulting, and as I mentioned before, serves as the global leader for the Future of Work Institute for the firm. He has more than 20 years of experience advising global organizations on issues of strategy, innovation, organization, people, culture, and change. Hatfield has advised business leaders on a multitude of initiatives, including activating strategy, defining a preferred future, addressing workforce trends, implementing agile and resilient operating models, and transforming culture oriented to growth, innovation, and agility. Steve, will you please join us?
Thank you, everyone. Very excited to be here. I often say that I have the coolest job at Deloitte, and my Deloitte colleagues up front may actually agree with that. So the firm asked me to take on the role of the Global Future of Work leader in 2017. We had begun to see some of the trends affecting work, workforce, and workplace through our Human Capital Trends Report and launched an initiative. And so I had the pleasure of watching these trends unfold through the course of the pandemic. And we'll try to provide you with some insight as to how things have evolved since then. But we are clearly in the midst of a workforce revolution. All of the headlines on a regular basis talk about labor shortages, talk about workforce sentiment, talk about robots and AI taking our jobs. By the way, the headlines back in 2018 were also, robots are taking our jobs. The media does a very nice job of grabbing a hold of our amygdala, pushing us to think about what's really hot and scary and interesting at this point. And in that noise, it starts to become harder to see the real trends that are coming. And so part of the job that I undertake when I'm addressing audiences is to try to help people figure out, well, though these things are important, there's a number of things on the horizon, and I would like to urge organizations to think about getting ready for Horizon 2 and not just getting swept up in the hype of the media. So we've been doing a pulse survey with CEOs now for about 2 years. And throughout the course of that survey, CEOs have consistently put labor shortages and labor dynamics, talent, those issues at the top of their list. You can see here through this, the inflation, it was first labor shortages and then inflation kind of took over. And now, with inflation starting to ramp down and be less of a concern, Goldman Sachs literally just put forward that their estimation of our ability to hit a soft landing is now at 80%. And so we're starting to talk ourselves not into a reflation. And what's become a little bit more critical, of course, is geopolitical instability. But in that, labor shortages continue to be top of mind. And as we address that, I think it's very important to keep in mind who we're talking about. So globally, there are about 3.3 billion workers. About 2 billion of them are in what we think of as the informal sector. Somewhere in the vicinity of 80% of those are men, only about half of those are women, and about 80% are deskless. So often when we sort of get ourselves into this conversation about the future of work and remote work and hybrid work, we forget about the deskless worker. But often these digital toolkits and what the AI toolkits are creating and evolving, the way workers are now more mobile and more digital, is actually enabling much more of this flexible hybrid future to evolve even past those that are specifically, if you will, geared to an office. And so as we go through some of these stats, just keep that in mind. It's hard to kind of draw a signal across a workforce dynamic that's this large. But what's been interesting as of late has been this conversation about the extent to which there's a recession, the extent to which we need the layoffs that are happening, and sort of what the dynamics are around those. And this is a piece that Bloomberg put forward about 8 months ago, and I thought it was really interesting because it sort of took stock of, well, who were the net winners and who were the net losers through the course of the pandemic? So this is US data. So taking a look, you can see, not surprisingly, it was hospitality and leisure that took this hit, government to some extent, right? And it was more on the frontline worker in terms of frontline delivery, Amazon Flex and Walmart kind of beefing up their workforces, the technology firms and business services beefing up their workforces. And so you can see this degree of shift in terms of sectors. And why that really becomes important is because when you actually start to take a look over time at the dynamic around the US layoffs, you can see some interesting dimensions here, right? So clearly the dot-com bust and even the Great Recession and the financial crisis of 2008 had much more of a spike in terms of layoffs in the US than we're seeing now currently on the far right-hand side of the graph. And obviously you can see the pandemic as this massive spike in 2020. But what's important to note here is from 2022 to the present, we've had about 782,000 layoffs. And in that, about 233 of them over the course of that time have been in technology. And so when you start to think about this tech layoff dynamic in relation to the previous slide, you can begin to see the nature of what's happening around this calibration. Tech talent was extremely hard to find, even as recently as, say, 3 to 4 months ago, even with the layoffs. The unemployment rate in the tech sector was somewhere in the vicinity of 1.7%. And so now organizations who have been craving for this talent are in a position to start to find them. Now, I never want to make light of the dynamic of the individual during the layoff period. It's not an easy experience, but when you put it in context, it sort of takes on a different light than what the media may be portraying. And so what's really happening is we still have a very hot labor market. Actually, this 10.1 million open jobs as of April has dropped to 9.8 as of May. So to my team in terms of updating the slides. That said, we've been between 11.4 and now 9.8 over the last 2 years post-pandemic. So we've had this dynamic where there's been between 1.9 and 1.7 open jobs per worker looking in the US. And that dynamic continues in Europe and Asia-Pac. In Asia-Pac, it's about 1.5. In Europe, it's about 1.3. And you can see here the unemployment rate across the OECD, lower than it's ever been. And so it's this hot labor market that these dynamics around work, workforce, and workplace are taking root. And this is the context into which you're hearing this conversation about, well, what the employer wants versus what the worker wants, and the empowerment that the worker has. So, as we dive in, I'd like to sort of spend time looking at that media hype and the relation of sort of the myth and reality of what's going on. There's a lot that's out there in terms of these new dimensions of nomenclature, the Great Resignation, right, quiet quitting, and so forth. Let's dive into those. And as I go through these, I'd like to take a page from Hans Rosling, who wrote the book Factfulness. This is about the possibilities. I'm an optimist by nature, but what we're seeing here are the possibilities. So, is it Great Resignation, or is it really new pools of talent? The quit rate dynamic has slowed. We're not seeing the same extent to which we saw over the past year and a half. It's back to sort of normal pre-pandemic levels. But also this conversation about the missing worker in the US, it's not there. The US participation in the labor force is higher than it's ever been. Women, higher than it's ever been in the last 22 years. 81% of the population between 25 and 54 are employed. And so what we're starting to see is organizations are in need of trying to find talent from different labor pools, and they're looking in different places. So suddenly, we're in a dynamic where people with disabilities are more employed than they've ever been. And interestingly, the neurodivergent, which is a population that's on the spectrum and has different issues around generally getting filtered out of employment opportunities because of social cues, but still have really interesting skills to bring to the table, they're suddenly of real interest and starting to find employment in ways they hadn't before. It's better, they thrive, if you will, in a virtual and hybrid environment because they don't have that issue in the office. And then finally, you're starting to see this ongoing dynamic that we'll talk more about around looking past pedigree towards skills. What are the skills that people have, not the pedigree that they bring to the table? The Philadelphia Fed did a study during the course of the pandemic, and it found that somewhere in the vicinity of 36 million Americans could earn up to 70% more if we thought about them in terms of their skills versus their pedigree. And organizations are moving in that direction. Humans and machines collaborating? Absolutely. And this trend will continue. This is what you're seeing as far as the rise of generative AI. This is what you're seeing as far as our working on digital toolkits. What's really interesting about ChatGPT is that it reached 100 million users just 2 months after launching. Put that in context, TikTok took 9 months, the iPhone took 2 years. And the dynamic around, well, what is this going to do to job loss continues. Of course, this has launched the next wave of robots taking our jobs conversation. And there's some interesting studies out there. Goldman Sachs did a study, the FT picked it up, somewhere in the vicinity of 300 million workers across North America and EMEA could have about 25% of what they do impacted thanks to ChatGPT. What that's really getting at is this dynamic of it's going to take away some of the drudgery of what those workers do, right? It's going to unleash some of their capacity. The typical engineer spends 70% of her time finding the data, and if ChatGPT can do that for her while she's getting a cup of coffee, what will she do with her extra time? That's the question, right? And so when we start talking about job loss, it's actually something more nuanced. It's more about unleashing a capacity into your workplace. What will you do with that capacity? Where will you direct it? And how will you find the skills that you need for it? Interestingly as well, pre-ChatGPT, it was all about the metaverse. And you can see here some of the stats, right? 25% of people will spend at least 1 hour a day in the metaverse doing anything, gaming, shopping, etc. Don't let the media also redirect your attention there. The Activision Microsoft merger has been approved. That's a $69 billion merger. And with the advent of the new headset from Apple, which is getting rave reviews, you can begin to see the trends about the continuation of our being, to some degree, further engaged in sort of our digital lives in the metaverse. New jobs, new skills. Deloitte did a study on the green economy. We found that there are certain sectors, of course, that are under major duress as a result of climate change and those dynamics. But the rise of the green economy, we predict that there could be about 300 million new green jobs globally by 2050. And most interestingly, 80% of the skills we need for those jobs exist. It's the 20%. And it's managing the transition around the 20%. Somewhere in the vicinity of 60% of workers are going to need to be reskilled in the next 5 years. And you can see here the stats from the World Economic Forum as far as jobs that will be eliminated versus jobs that will be created. It's a churn. It's an ongoing evolution. Not surprising. 15 years ago, we didn't have a job called a cloud engineer. 15 years ago, we didn't have a job called a podcast manager, right? I went to a conference, and I had the pleasure of being in sort of the bar at this conference, and I ran into this young woman, and lo and behold, there was a gaming conference at the same hotel, and she was a gaming historian. She had a PhD in gaming, right? And you can see here the new jobs, the new skills, AI, big data, green skills, complex systems thinking, and so forth. Quiet quitting. This is my favorite. Is it really work ethic or is it life ethic? I don't think there's any confusion that the pandemic has really created a different sense of what we want from the workplace and what we want from our work lives. What was very interesting is that if you're tracking the storylines there, Kevin Roose, very early on in the pandemic, coined the phrase YOLO, you only live once. And in Asia-Pac, there's been this ongoing discussion around Tanping, lie flat. Those youth populations are not interested in the 996 model. They're not interested in lifetime employment in the way that it existed in the past. And so suddenly what you have is this realization that work needs to take a different flavor in our lives. And that's why you're seeing the rise of things like well-being. And the way that millennials and Gen Zs are putting much more of stock on things like work-life balance and learning and growth opportunities along with pay. And why mental health and burnout is the number one reason why they would leave a job. And this extends even to the C-suite. We did a study with the C-suite on their well-being. 90% of the C-suite is putting in place personal well-being goals. 70% is thinking about leaving their job because they can't meet those goals in their current employer. So it's the entire population. Productivity theater, productivity surveillance. Somewhere in the vicinity of 78% of organizations have put in place remote work tracking tools to try to understand what's going on in this virtual environment. And it's created this bit of a backlash around productivity theater and the mouse jigglers and all the rest. What it really boils down to is trust and the erosion of trust and the extent to which trust becomes a critical staple for how organizations sort of motivate their employees and can create new value. High trust organizations are 2.5 times more likely to succeed than those that are not. And so what really becomes important here is understanding how to go after the extent to which there are new data sets becoming available, thanks to our being on all of these digital tools, and how do we take advantage of them in the right way? Deloitte has put out a study called The Quantified Organization. It's about moving beyond productivity. And the idea behind it is that we're actually at a point where we can measure just about anything. What do we really want to measure? And are we going to bring current thinking to the table, modern work, or are we going to let it still be rooted in the first and second industrial revolution? And we'll talk about that. Return to office. I often wonder, why is there this debate? Why at all, right? Because the issue becomes one of, what are you actually designing for? If you want to create opportunities for workers to collaborate more, to be apprenticed more, to develop relationships, to create culture, then design the work environment around that, right? 76% of millennials in our study and 74% of women prefer hybrid work because of the flexibility. And they don't want to go back. McKinsey put out a study this week. Depending on the sector, hybrid is averaging at between 3.2 and 3.8 days per week per sector. And they're declaring that, well, hybrid's won. I think that The stats around the US occupancy rates have shown us, you can see here, it's been hovering under 50% as of late. It was as low as under 20% initially in the pandemic. And this is after all the different pushes around, we'll come back to work after Labor Day, we'll come back to work after Christmas. Actually, this is the debate we should be having. Gartner did a study, it asked workers, why would you come to the office? And you can see the answers, building relationships, collaborating with my colleagues, right? Changing up my routine. When asked, why don't you come to the office? 60%, no compelling reason. What does that say? Why aren't we creating those compelling reasons? And so it's time to think about moving beyond these conversations. It's time to think about moving beyond quiet quitting and great resignation, right? And return to office. And to start thinking about, well, what shifts have really emerged? And where are we headed? And it's interesting. Thomas Friedman did an op-ed piece, and I grabbed this quote. He says that when we think about it in terms of the progression across the different industrial revolutions, it doesn't do justice to what's really happening. When we think about generative AI and the rest, it's really a Promethean moment. And you can see that here, right? What's interesting is you track these different markers in terms of the progression of the Industrial Revolution. First, it was 100 years between the first and the second, and about 100 years between the second and the third, and then it's 50 years, and then here we are. Second, you can begin to see what happened, right? We went from in-factory to in-office, and we just started adding through the third industrial revolution apps on the desktop, right? The typical organization, the typical digital worker has around 200 different apps that they use in any one organization to create more productivity. Okta did a study. The typical digital worker will toggle between these apps on his or her desktop about 1,200 times a day. It's about 32 lost days a year. Why? Because we actually took the old frame and just started computerizing it. So our mindset is sort of organized against these thinkers, against this way of operating. Frederick Taylor, time and motion studies, throughput and output, more productivity based on efficiency. Ronald Coase, the theory of the firm. All the different parts of the enterprise exist under one umbrella because it reduces the friction cost to getting things done. When he developed that theory, we were not on digital platforms where those friction costs are reduced. He thought about it in terms of the hierarchy of the organization. And William H. White, groupthink, the organization man. You will sublimate who you are authentically to the culture of the greater good of the organization and become like the rest. These are all contrary to how we really think today in terms of where we need to focus, but these still influence many of how we structure our work and our workforce and our workplace. And so it's really about these shifts. And this is what I'm urging organizations to pay attention to. First, it's going from jobs to skills. And you can begin to see that already through some of the dialogue about the need to upskill and reskill. Second, it's more than employees. It's actually about workforce ecosystems. So all of the different pieces and parts of contingents and privates and gig workers who spend time helping you meet your business outcomes, that's who you should be focusing on, not just the full-time employees on your balance sheet. Third, it's really shifting from top down to bottom up. We're seeing that, ChatGPT. The reason why it's taken off, it's a brush fire, and it's people are bringing it to the workplace without IT introducing it, right? It's really about a bottoms-up effort, and what do we do about that? Fourth, it's not just flex work, it's flex everything. Flexing schedules, right? Our 9-to-5 shift model was created by Henry Ford. Our 5-day work week was also created by Henry Ford because he wanted the weekend so the buyers of cars could go on Sunday drives, right? And we still operate that way, right? It's not about automation. It's about augmentation. It's about workers working with machines. And then I would argue it's not about productivity, right? And we'll talk more about the way that throughput and output is framed our thinking and how organizations operate. It's actually something else because humans are really the focus, and it's about how humans perform as humans, bringing their full capabilities to the table, operating at their physical and mental best. And you can see how these things relate. The more that you focus on skills, the greater the ability to tap into ecosystems. It's about curating the ecosystem of the skills that you need, and you can deliver them to the project team when they need it. Those organizations that are focused on orchestrating ecosystems are 8 times more likely to reimagine the work so that an ecosystem player can join the team, and 5 times more likely to spend time with the project leader, making sure they find the skills they need to be successful on their team, as opposed to just letting all of those ecosystem players sort of exist sort of in the ether. Cisco's a good example here. Out of 150,000 in their ecosystem, about 80,000 are full-time employees. They began to recognize that nobody was paying attention to the other 70,000. And now they're putting in place systems and processes and owners to care for those folks, to ensure that ecosystem is curated. And from employer-led to employee-led, 55% of workers have already said that they spend time in their work lives in different models. What they're looking for is the agency to understand what's happening in their workplace, because they want to grow and develop and take advantage of new opportunities. They want to upskill and reskill. And so you're seeing these emerge. Organizations with a skills-based approach are 63% more likely to achieve results. 74% of managers and organizations see the fact they need to organize against ecosystems and are looking for ways to do that. 84% of organizations believe that an increase in worker agency and influence will be important to their success. Back to connecting the dot on ChatGPT being a brush fire in the organization. Back to how do we upskill and reskill and help workers find the different things that they're passionate about, the adjacencies in the organization, to grow and develop. And then the next 3, flexing everything. Millennials and Gen Zs identified these top qualities when asked what impresses them about their peers. Ability to maintain a positive work-life balance, ability to live their life on their terms. What they're looking for is the ability to set things up in an organization that helps them operate at their best. We've already talked a lot about AI. What's really interesting, 60% of organizations are thinking about how do I augment my workforce with these toolkits. Only about 4% are looking to replace workers. Somewhere in the vicinity of 12% are looking to use it to manage workers. That's actually really interesting. The AI toolkits are solving the shift game around who needs to be on the floor at any one time. You want to have a Friday morning off because you need to go to a school pageant, and the AI toolkits can help work out that shift model, right? We were doing that largely in the pandemic in many different provider institutions and clinics to try to solve the needs of making sure that that workforce had all the right parties on the shift and still had enough downtime to rejuvenate. And then finally, this conversation about productivity. Somewhere in the vicinity of 60% of managers are looking at tasks like emails and hours logged on to try to assess the productivity of their team. It has nothing to do with the outcome that they're producing, right? 87% of employees claim to be productive at work, but just 12% of their leaders agree. There's this disconnect in terms of what they can see or not, and they're searching to try to figure it out, but doing so through activities as opposed to outcomes. And so we're really starting to see the way in which things are becoming more flexible, flex shift models, flexible opportunities for people within the shop, right? We're starting to see how workers are really driving and taking advantage of tapping into that agency. We're starting to see the way in which human performance is coming to the top of the fore, and the way in which organizations are realizing that the well-being of their workforce actually really matters in a way that they hadn't thought of in the past. And so how do we set up metrics to grapple with that? So in our Human Capital Trends report, we asked, what's getting in the way? Why aren't these things happening, right? What was really interesting, 46% of the respondents came back with legacy mindsets. Many respondents said leaders are really critical to this, but they don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. They don't know what steps to take, right? They're sort of overwhelmed by the degree of change, the wave and wave of disruption. And so we put forward in our trends report 3 new fundamentals in the world that's coming. In this world where the structures that you used to think of that related to work, workforce, and workplace are fading away and things are becoming more boundaryless, You need to apply these fundamentals. You need to think like a researcher, bringing that sort of hypothesis-driven problem solving to the table, testing and experimenting more than you ever have in every single dimension. 2, you need to co-create with your workforce. You need to tap into that agency. They're the ones who are bringing these toolkits to the table, grappling with these new changes in terms of these AI toolkits or these digital toolkits, or what they're looking for in terms of how to create the flexibility and balance in their lives. And 3rd, you need to prioritize human outcomes. It really truly is about humanizing in the end. And so what we end up having is this convergence, this opportunity to actually look at these trends and go forth and reimagine workforce and workplace, something that's more fit for the modern era that we're in and not really connected, if you will, to where we've been. And so with that, let's get to work. Thank you.
Right. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Keegan, and I am the director for the Office of the Future of Work at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. We're delighted to be one of the sponsors today and are really grateful for all of you making the time to join us to have these important conversations, and really grateful to Colorado Succeeds and the Colorado Business Roundtable for putting this event on and helping continue really important conversations that we've been having. So I'm only going to take a few minutes of your time to tell you a bit about the office before I hand it off to my colleague Eve Lieberman. But I wanted to make sure that you all are aware and excited about all of the work that's happening in Colorado. And today is, I think, step one, and hopefully an energizing moment for all of you to step in and help us make Colorado thrive and make it the state it can be. So the Office of the Future of Work was created through an executive order in 2019, and it was actually codified in state law just this last session. And what we're responsible for doing is raising awareness about future of work trends. So we're committed to making sure the workforce development ecosystem, employers, educators, and job seekers are aware of how these trends are impacting their life. We also identify policies and programs that help prepare Coloradans for the future of work. We know, as a result of all of these trends that we just heard about, that there's been a proliferation of low-wage work, a need to transition more people into high-quality jobs. We know that every worker needs to have digital skills, a lifelong learning mindset in combination with their human skills and occupational skills so that we have future-ready workers. And we know that we need business at the table to do this. So the office has 2 key initiatives that we're really working on, and I hope you'll reach out to learn more about. First is apprenticeships. We believe that apprenticeships are the future of work because they start and end with business getting the talent that they need, building the talent that they need, and they create accessible pathways into employment. It's a very exciting time. I'm a little biased, but I think it's generally exciting as well to be part of apprenticeships in Colorado because just as of July 1st, we transitioned from being regulated at the federal level to being regulated at the state level, which means we have an opportunity to be more agile, more nimble, more responsive to the needs of Colorado employers and the Colorado labor market so that more and more people can adopt apprenticeship. And we have a team of people working to make it as easy as possible for employers to invest in their workforce and to design training that helps them build the talent they need. The other key initiative that I hope you'll get involved in, or at least I can pique your interest about, is how we really close the digital divide. We heard about the impact of technology on the skills every worker needs, and we know that about 1/3 of workers across the United States have limited or no digital literacy skills. I always like to ask at these events, so bear with me if you've heard me say this before, but if you can just raise your hand if you had to learn a new digital tool in the last year. Yeah, So it's a problem that we all need to think about for our own learning, for the people we serve, for the people we employ, and we don't have a ton of strategies right now. We have 150,000 households in Colorado that don't have a computer, and we have so many huge opportunities to make sure there's affordable access to internet and that we know how people can build the skills and have access to devices for what they need to do. So they can use ChatGPT or Bard to its fullest potential. So I encourage you to reach out because we are building a state digital equity plan. We need your perspective, we need your engagement so that we ensure we're creating resources that help you get your jobs done and help you find the talent that you need. So with that, I'm gonna pass it off and just wanna say thank you again for taking the time to be here. I'm really excited for the conversation and really excited to learn alongside all of you. And so with that, I'm going to transition to Eve Lieberman, who serves as the Executive Director of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. So prior to this role, she served as the Chief Policy Advisor and Legislative Counsel for Governor Polis and oversaw the successful passage of many of the governor's key priorities, including free full-day kindergarten, the implementation of universal preschool, historic investments in transportation, and economic recovery programs. You timed that perfectly with your bio. So I'll pass it off. Thank you all again. Thanks for being here, and I hope to continue the conversation.
Hello. OEDIT's mission is to empower all to thrive in Colorado's economy. We want to protect and enhance what makes our state a great place to live, work, raise a family, and retire, and make it accessible for everyone. And we regularly see businesses choose Colorado for expansion or relocation because of our nation-leading quality of life, our collaborative and stable ecosystem, our central location that allows for global market access, our diverse portfolio of advanced and growing industries, and of course, our top talent in the nation. Colorado's talent pool has the motivation, knowledge, and skills to tackle the world's biggest problems. The state's workforce consistently places at the top of rankings by Forbes, CNBC, U.S. News and World Report, thanks to our leading metrics in growth, educational attainment, STEM orientation, and participation in the labor workforce. These trends have led to the third highest share of adults with an advanced degree, the second highest labor force participation rate, and the fourth highest share of STEM workers. And OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and of International Trade, has long understood the importance of workforce development programs in maintaining this unmatched talent pool. Skill Advance Colorado helps businesses and nonprofits create customized job training for their employees so businesses can remain competitive and workers can build transferable skills. In fiscal year 2022 and 23, this program helped fund trainings for 2,100 Colorado employees. And under the leadership of Governor Polis, we are expanding our workforce development focus. It's one of the top challenges that we hear businesses face, and it's key to maintaining our economic competitiveness. That's why we've hired our first ever strategic advisor on workforce development and business engagement, Marie Pecoraro. We know that in Colorado, job growth in each of our strategic industries has outpaced national growth, and there are 2 jobs open for every unemployed person in Colorado. And when we take a closer look, over 90% of family-sustaining jobs require a post-secondary education or training beyond a high school diploma, yet participation in post-secondary education and training is declining. In 2020, only half of high school graduates enrolled in a public or private college or university the fall after graduation. That was a 10% decline from the previous year and a trend that preceded the pandemic. And this decline can be seen across ethnic groups in cities and rural areas across Colorado. And we know the Colorado paradox. It's true that many Colorado residents with 4-year degrees come here from out of state, and our homegrown students are less likely to see the value of a college degree. So without innovative training programs, our homegrown students are less likely to access the good-paying jobs that sustain families and create a productive economy. If you look at Colorado's population trends, we see a number of things, but we see growth in our aging population and slowing migration trends. So we need to work to provide workers with the skills and trainings for the jobs now and in the future. And we need to double down to retrain our homegrown talent and ensure that Coloradans are trained in the skills that our industry partners require. We know the data proves the ROI on many existing innovative and effective models of workforce development. These already exist. Many of these programs are expanding through growing public-private partnerships between educational institutions, industry, and employers, developing modern apprenticeship and on-the-job training programs. For example, school districts in North Metro, Colorado Springs, Cannon City, and Grand Junction have developed high school and career pathways with community colleges, so students graduate ready for Colorado's in-demand jobs in IT, construction, healthcare, and education. Students spend half their time in the classroom and half their time on the job working, and they get paid while they're doing it. These types of programs show that business is so critical to co-creating that talent with educational partners. As a state, we are investing in this type of innovative talent development programs to foster new pathways to high-paying, in-demand jobs by region, ensuring that Colorado workers are prepared for and can access the new good-paying jobs across the state. Last month, OEDIT joined Governor Polis to announce 46 recipients of the Opportunity Now grants. That will invest $85 million to foster pathways for in-demand jobs by region through 3 phases of funding. This transformative funding will help support and grow new partnerships between industry and educational institutions and developing the current and future workforce across Colorado. Among the recipients, CSU Pueblo is pioneering a nursing program that will provide additional nurses and address the healthcare shortage in 15 southern Colorado counties. Western States College of Construction is making apprenticeship programs more diverse and accessible for women, minorities, other underserved populations, and improving apprenticeship completion rates on the Front Range and Western Slope. This is some of the impact that we can see that we can scale with these type of programs. Apprentice Labrada Hill, she developed the skills as a sheet metal worker in Grand Junction. She was introduced to the trade by her sister, who's also a sheet metal worker. And she's building a new career that is self-sustaining to help her raise her daughter as a single mother. And it allows Victor Sutash, a pipe fitting apprentice in Denver, to start a career after transitioning from the Army. And supporting Maria Hawthorne to grow her earning potential as a plumber after being introduced to the trade by her son. She credits the apprenticeship program with teaching her skills that help her earn more than a college degree did. These are the life-changing experiences we are looking to foster across the state through Opportunity Now Colorado. Collectively, the first round of recipients will serve all 14 regions of Colorado, from the Central Plains to Southeast Colorado to Region 10 and the Northwest. The top 3 industries that we're looking to fund are education, healthcare, and infrastructure. They're all priorities identified in Colorado's talent pipeline, and 98% serve at least one target industry. And we're excited to build on these targeted investments by implementing the Universal Scholarship Program, which was passed by the General Assembly and signed into law by Governor Polis this year. These scholarships will reduce financial barriers for students accessing both a post-secondary education and a job training program. And they connect graduating seniors in the class of 2024 with career and counseling support so that they can access Colorado's most in-demand careers, again, by region. Programs like these have a proven return on investment and offer important first steps to keep our workforce strong, but they have to be scaled and expanded. Across industries, we are seeing that demand for top talent is growing and only becoming more competitive. There are many opportunities before us. The once-in-a-generation federal investment opportunity like the CHIPS and Science Act, which aims to onshore semiconductor and advanced industries back to the US, 60% of those jobs do not require a college degree. The federal government is mandating that we think boldly about workforce. And Governor Polis is focused on targeted investments to address these critical workforce shortages that vary by region, but it has to be a collective effort. Educational institutions across Colorado must also do their part, and many are committing to change and innovation and working towards a new normal, moving from slow education and training cycles to nimble, agile system responsive to Colorado jobs, from focusing on credential attainment to targeted investments for in-demand skills by region for individuals, from place-based learning to on-the-job and work-based learning, financial constraints to zero-cost options and affordability, from traditional hiring requirements to skills-based hiring, and from academic advising to career advising. And Colorado industry needs to prepare the high school graduates to enter the workforce and help mid-career professionals in developing the new skills so they can respond to the skills that businesses require. It's not sufficient anymore to leave this training to academic institutions alone. In order for talent to meet the needs of business, industry must become a producer of talent. And Colorado needs your partnership and participation to ensure our state's success and keep our workforce strong. We have seen the most influential business leaders be innovative and look closely at their talent needs and ask these questions. What skills do you need from qualified employees? What barriers and gaps exist for co-creating talent? How can we help promote your best practices that help employees develop these type of skills? What are the best ways to invest in workforce development programs, internally or in partnership with educational institutions? And what are the innovative ways to implement skills-based hiring? Are there positions where you could remove degree requirements? These are not easy questions to answer, but the challenges of today requires us to think boldly. As a model employer, the state is trying to work on its part by expanding skills-based hiring and apprenticeship models for its employees. And as you heard Catherine Keegan talk about, creating an apprenticeship office and the target investments that address these workforce shortages through Opportunity Now and the Universal Scholarship Program. Through our efforts, we have learned the most effective ways to begin this change is to learn from organizations and companies that are always one step ahead. As a state, we're known for our collaborative ecosystem and diverse partnerships, and we can put this ecosystem to work to help with our workforce development pipelines. When you see someone else's wins firsthand, you can adapt that idea to suit your business. We believe this so strongly, it's our call for action today. After leaving here, reach out to one industry partner and ask how they're rethinking workforce development. Ask them about their approach, their wins, and consider how could this inform your own actions surrounding workforce development. It will be worth it. Companies that look for innovative ways to remove barriers see the benefit, and Colorado does too. Positions are filled by employees with strong skill sets and the aptitude to continue learning new skills throughout their careers. Employees have access to career pathways that enable them and their families to thrive. And Colorado remains nationally and globally competitive, contributing to a strong and equitable economy. And this is a collective effort. So we're not asking industry alone to create the workforce of the future, but we are asking you to join us. Let's co-create Colorado's talent so that it continues to be the best in the nation.
Well, thank you very much, Eve. It's good to hear with the demand for top talent only continuing to grow, that OEDIT is taking action to support Colorado's workforce today, as well as tomorrow. When you think of work, I'm curious, although you don't get to answer me, what comes to mind when you hear that word work? Maybe roll it over in your mind for just a second. I know for me, when I think of work, I think of the words, the ideals of dignity, purpose. Dave and I were on the stage earlier. We talked about we both got started as paper boys. I remember being a kid when out running my neighborhood, and I grew up in the South in Wilmington, North Carolina, and going door to door slinging those papers. And now every paper sold for $0.25. This makes me sound so old. And for every quarter, I got 10 cents. Doesn't sound like a lot, probably wasn't, but believe it or not, at the end of the day, it added up to a couple bucks. I can go to the corner store and get a juice, pack of chips, maybe a candy bar. Didn't have to ask mom for money. For me, even then, age 10 or 11 years old, it gave me a sense of self, a sense of dignity, a sense of earning it. And I'd like to believe that that still means something today, earning it. I certainly hope it'll mean something tomorrow. And purpose, perhaps more than ever in our lifetime, my sense is that people want to do things that mean something to themselves, to their community, to those they love. There was a recent report I read that suggested of Generation Z, 80% want to work for an employer that is purpose-driven, with a potentially 2.8 times improvement in retention when an employer can say they have purpose in their work. For me, that also screams higher productivity. I don't just do 9 News, I actually run a business as well. As far as for making life better for ourselves, our children, our communities, our children's children, that's what we do. That makes us uniquely Coloradans, Americans. My grandmother used to say, ain't none of us here to stay. So I've always looked at things through that prism of, in the time that we do have on this earth, what's our responsibility to our families, to our communities, very much our world, to afford them a better environment from which to thrive, socially and economically. I'll leave it there as we turn towards reflections from millennials and Gen Z on development and retention. And before I pass things over to Teray Escobar, Executive Director of Ednium Alumni Collective, here's a bit about Teray. Teray is the Executive Director of Ednium, an action-focused community development organization that partners with public school alumni to change the way cities educate and reinvest in their homegrown talent. That's something I can get behind. Teray Escobar is a Denver Public Schools graduate who has dedicated his career thus far to dismantling barriers to higher education in his community. Teray, stage is yours.
How are we feeling today? Y'all doing good? First, just want to say thank you for the platform that Colorado Succeeds. I'm really excited about this conversation and see how aligned some things are. That always gives me some encouragement. Sometimes you think you got to come up here and fight something, you know? And so I was kind of struggling with what I was going to say today and, you know, trying to figure out what that was. And luckily I have children. How many of us have children up here? All right, cool. So you know they're going to tell you the truth. So yesterday I left the milk out on the table and my 6-year-old daughter promptly said, hey, Dad, practice what you preach. She makes sure we learn that. So I figured I'd do that today. You know, at Ednium, we preach about the power of shared experiences. We've learned that vulnerability and sharing your stories develops authentic relationships and and allows us to challenge our assumption. And we think that those are the fundamental pillars to growth and change in our systems. And we believe that asking the right questions often leads to more impactful change than kind of clinging to an input that you might and allowing your ego to drive. So today I hope to share a few stories, kind of put some faces and some connection to some of what we've heard this morning that we hope that will lead to more perspectives to help us kind of drive the quality outcomes for our homegrown talent. Is that cool? Cool. So a little bit more about me. I graduated in 2011 from Abraham Lincoln High School. I'm a proud Lancer. Real quick, how many DPS graduates do we have in the room? Okay, it's actually more than I thought. Graduated in 2011, realizing I'm not that young anymore. My knees and a lot of the younger alumni that we work with tend to remind me of that every single day. My wife and I were teenage parents. Our son was born 3 months premature our junior year. He was about a pound of 14 ounces, about the size of my hand, right? Now the dude's 13, won't stop eating, is projected to be 6'4", and keeps telling me regular size man for practice when he starts going. So, but I start with that because for me personally, when we found out that we were having our son, it was the first time I experienced what it felt like when you were no longer perceived as a win for the system, right? You know, I was a good student, close to a 4.0 GPA, was an athlete. I crushed the standardized test. Again, to make me sound old, it was the CSAP at that time. And I had a principal and an administrator bring me into their office because I used to say I wanted to go to Stanford. And he invited me to go on a trip and a tour with him. Fast forward a couple months later, you know, the word gets out that we're having our first child. Those tickets were revoked, and he was like, hey man, maybe go get a job or something, right? So I never ended up applying for Stanford, one of the biggest regrets of my life. Might try to still go to grad school if anybody got some connections out there, help your boy out. But I did end up receiving the Daniels Fund Scholarship, and I actually came to the University of Denver, and that changed my life. And at that moment, I made this commitment that I was gonna do everything in my power to help people that came from my community, to identify their vision, to get hope, and to keep it in a world that kind of seems all too eager to encourage them to throw it away. And when I got to DU, I did all kinds of college access programming, and I really felt like I was making a difference. I used to see the smiles and the hope in people's faces that now that they were able to go to college, what that might be able to unlock for them. At the same time, I was still working 2 to 3 jobs just to pay our phone bill, make sure we had gas in the car, make sure we had groceries. And when I graduated, everybody cried and told me how proud of me they were, right? You made it. That's what it felt like. I remember all my homies kind of giving me, you know, a bunch of love when they'd see me in my like cheap K&G suit, my pleather shoes, all the while just to drive to a job to make myself $35,000 a year. So when I would count pennies at the end of the month, you know, I'd get frustrated, like, man, this is what making it is, huh? Didn't make much sense to me. Yeah, I was the dude that told everybody that if you wanted to be something greater, this was the route that you had to take, and I believed it, right? But at some point, you start to kind of feel like a fraud a little bit. Now, I felt alone in this process until one of my friends had kind of asked me to go get a drink. And, you know, this guy was a few years older than me. In my mind, he was the person that had it all figured out. And for whatever reason that day, you know, he kind of confided in me that he was struggling. He was struggling with confidence, that he, you know, he got this job that he hated, that he was afraid to let his family down, even though he was making more money than his family had ever made. He said he felt stuck. He didn't know how to pivot. He didn't know how to shift careers. And he didn't even know how to talk about it without sounding like he was complaining at home or coming off as like the angry dude at work. And he shook his head and he was just like, man, I did everything they told us we were supposed to do, bro, right? So at that point, I realized I wasn't alone, so I just started talking to as many people as I could from the neighborhood. And you know, I heard so many people that were struggling with those same feelings, from the single teenage mother who somehow figured out a way to graduate from college, but right now is struggling to take a $5 raise in fear that she might lose her public benefits. At the same time, she sees the high school dropout who got a tow truck from his grandfather and is now making 6 figures with the company that he built. And that tow truck driver, for some reason, thinks his perspective is less valuable than mine as a DU business school grad, even though he was the one that helped me form my LLC paperwork for my consulting business. Something's not adding up here, right? So many times you talk to alumni, you talk to people, and underscoring everything that they say is fundamentally like, I feel lied to. I feel lied to. And the statistics don't show that that feeling is actually, you know, wrong. I think we heard that half of our DPS graduates are going to go to college. I think about half of those are going to actually finish college, and about half of those are going to find themselves a job that really allow them to take care of their families. So again, something's just not adding up here. Now, a lot of that feeling of betrayal tends to be rooted in mismanaged expectations. I remember when I walked into my high school, there was a big Think College sign when you walked in, right? We saw the posters that you can make $1 million more over your lifetime if you just get a bachelor's degree as opposed to your high school diploma. The issue isn't that college is bad. The issue is what it was presented to us, that the credential in and of itself was success. And students like me were just trying to figure out how to feed our families, right? That credential was a means to that end. And I used to always say in some of these speeches is that a credential isn't necessarily the finish line It's merely a ticket to maybe, hopefully, run the race, right? And so what I'm saying is that the credential in and of itself, and we've optimized the system for credentials, that it doesn't necessarily guarantee anything, and it definitely doesn't guarantee anything from low-income students and a lot of the students that we work with in DPS. And you all know you're all business people. What gets measured gets managed. So you kind of take stock in terms of what gets managed in schools: test scores, GPAs, college attainment rates, grade point average, whatever the case may be. And even in those metrics, we're falling short in a bad way. And again, none of those metrics are bad. I'm just suggesting that they're incomplete. And this phenomenon kind of started to become crystal clear for me this past school year. Like I said, my son is 13. He had just switched schools. And in this new school, he had they were kind of a little bit further ahead in their math curriculum than his last school was. And so he's frustrated because he always prides himself on excelling in math, right? He talks about wanting to be an engineer. Again, if anybody has any connections, let me know. So before one of his quizzes one day, we sat down for hours practicing and getting prepped for this quiz. And, he went and took it. The next day, he got an A. He comes home excited. And I'm excited, too. I'm probably more excited than him. Yes, because he got an A, but mostly I was just proud of myself to be able to still work through, some of those fractions. And so just as an exercise, I said, hey, let's sit down and show me how you did it, And so I switched up some of the numbers and kind of moved the formula. And he was kind of trying to go through the step-by-step process that he had learned. And when he got stuck, I kept pushing him. Now try again. What is that? Try again. Why did you do this? And he got frustrated with me. And finally, he kind of like put the pen down, was like, Dad, why we're doing this, man? I already got the A. We built a system to where he thought that the whole purpose of him doing that quiz was to get a good grade, not to learn something, not to test his knowledge. And that was so deeply baked into him that, it made sense why we were moving. So I'm sure everybody has some type of example of how this actually manifests itself, in your day-to-day life. This same phenomenon is the reason why a lot of schools will optimize for test prep versus content learning. It's the same reason why some high schools are going to require every student to apply for a community college in order to walk for graduation so they could put 100% college acceptance outside of their school. If the credential is the goal in and of itself, what does the credential actually prove you can do? This is the deeper question. And so it fundamentally begs the question, like, what is school for, right? What is this system for? Most people would say that it's generally to prepare you to be successful minimally, at least in your career. And one of the big questions I want to ask you all after this presentation is like, what does the credential that you all require actually say that that person can do? What have they proven that it can do once they enter the workforce? I don't know. I would genuinely want to learn. And to flip it, what skills do they actually need to be able to thrive in your business? Now, underscoring all of this is it seems like, one of our biggest observations over the past 3 years is that Denver doesn't seem to have a shared definition of success for its children long term. We've asked countless hundreds and hundreds of alumni, community members, students, how they define success for themselves. And consistently, we hear 5 things typically come up. And this doesn't matter if you could be talking to a state senator, a CEO, a high school dropout, a current high school student, or a current college student. And these 5 themes, they don't come in any particular order, and everybody seems to have different thresholds for what these themes are. But they go financial security, health, quality relationships, both professionally and personally, a sense of purpose, we heard that, and a sense of self. Can I be my authentic self? And one thing to notice in those 5 is that they're all interconnected and kind of mutually reinforcing, right? And I don't know about y'all, but if, my 2 kids grew up and they had those 5 things, I think I did a pretty good job as a parent, and again, it's not that much disattached from the low-income student to you all sitting here today. So again, some other questions I'd like for us to be able to discuss is, how do you define success? How has that definition of success evolved over time? And how do we take the infrastructure, how do we build the infrastructure and the mechanics to connect what is required for success in life and the way we're developing our children from pre-K to 12 in order to be able to thrive? Again, all these observations stem from NEM's mission to ensure that every Denver Public School alumni has the knowledge, skills, and agency to be full participants in our democracy and economy. And we're attempting to accomplish that by changing the way our city both educates and reinvests in its homegrown talent. And we heard a little bit about the Colorado paradox, but if there's anything I've learned during this work, is that just getting people to care isn't enough to create sustainable change, right? There's usually a lot of people with great intentions. Since I got some extra time here, one of the just to demonstrate like how some of these things play out, even with our best intentions, even knowing the problem. You know, one of the first things EDIUM did was we recognized that financial education wasn't required in our schools, so we pushed to have financial literacy as a graduation requirement. Now, in this process, though, we went to the board. The board said, "That's a great idea, Teray. We should really do that." You know who the problem is? It's the district, the superintendent. He's the one that has to make that choice. Superintendent said, "Yo, that's awesome." You know who the problem is? It's the teachers union. Teacher union said, "That's great. It's the principals union." The principals union came back and said, "You know what? That's a board problem." Right? The now commissioner of education and then DPS superintendent, she said something to me that was really interesting. She said, "You know, Teray, you're young. The one thing there's a lot of stuff I want to do, and what I need you to start to think about is how do you make me do the things that I already want to accomplish, right? What is it going to take to actually move these policies? And then once we shift the policies and we have great things like Opportunity Now, we have great things like the state aligned with what we're talking about, what is the process of implementation? And through that process of implementation, how do we not tie our egos toward one particular solution or one particular role? And how do we make sure that we're not thinking about inputs in terms of outcomes? If I leave anything with you all today is that we have great talent. We have the people, but we're trying to think about how do we get them kind of retrofit into our systems as opposed to really being able to connect that system. It's really hard to thrive in life when the mechanism you have to develop you and prepare you for life is completely disconnected from the realities of life. So if you all could just kind of think back and hopefully have conversations at your tables of how you've seen this thing manifest. This is about life outcomes. We don't currently measure life outcomes for our public school alumni. We might have an opportunity to change our systems and change some lives. I appreciate being here with y'all today. Thank you.
Well done, brother. Well done. Well done. Thank you, Teray. We're going to begin to transition here. The panel. I want to hopefully get your minds in the right space as we transition. Hopefully you feel like we've had a great start to the morning. What do you think, huh? Great start to the morning? Okay, good conversation. You know, I want to shift gears and because we want to start to think about how do we better sync up education and industry needs? What are the pathways that train students and members of the workforce for business needs of today and the future? I think one of the fundamental questions that I always tend to ask myself is, do we need more experiential learning? Not just hypothetical or scenario-based, but learning through working on real business problems and opportunities. Which also begs the question, you know, if that's part of the answer, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, how do we deal with some of the capacity constraints many businesses face having to resource or staff working with students and members of the workforce on these challenges? Something I hear sometimes when I talk to other business folks about doing more to prepare the workforce. I'm thinking, or at least I'm hoping, that Julie Stone, Investment Director with Gary Community Ventures, and the next panel may have some thoughts on this and more. Julie will be moderating the panel with 3 other outstanding leaders in Colorado's education and employer system. They'll be discussing public-private partnerships that meet industry's talent needs. A little bit about Julie Stone. As I said before, she's the investment director at Gary Community Ventures, focused on self-sufficiency, wealth building for Colorado families. She's the child of small business owners from rural Wyoming. In her early career, she began it at her family's truck stop, which then led to opportunities to work in business, policy, and the philanthropic sectors. I'd like to welcome to the stage Julie Stone. Thank you, Julie. Good luck.
I feel like I need it. All right, I saw a few folks stand up because I too feel like we've been sitting a while. So as we keep like bringing you lots of important things to consider. Would you like to stand up for how about this? I'll frame us up for 5 minutes about what this panel is about, and I'll feel so important if you all stand for the 5-minute framing. Can that be okay? And then as soon as the panel gets going, we'll just sit back down again and hear what some very wise leaders in our community have to teach us. So go ahead, move your arms, move your bodies. All right. So Sam Gary used to say that the measure of a company is the health and vitality of the community that surrounds it. We all get there, none of us do. At Gary, we want every family to be able to raise thriving children, and that work starts in early childhood. It matters in K-12, and for purposes of today, it hinges a lot on whether people get really meaningful jobs and have the opportunity to build wealth in their future. This is uniquely possible in Colorado. Our Colorado economy led the jobs recovery in this country, thanks to a whole lot of people that I imagine are in this room. We have so much opportunity here. We have so many good jobs. I'm from Wyoming. I can tell you that there are so many choices here that don't exist everywhere. We make prosperity true in Colorado. The bigger headline question for today that I hope you're convinced of, because I am, having listened to these past speakers, is how do we help more families be a part of that prosperity? At Gary, when we think about how you bend a population level trend, we study what that would take, starting with the voice of community. It is my honor every day to have the opportunity to follow Teray, because we should all be following Teray. When he says that 70% of our kids are not going on to complete any kind of future credential, no degree, no pathway, no certificate, then what Eve taught us is that 70% of our kids have no shot at self-sufficiency. Teray's not talking about some kids. He's not talking about an exceptional dilemma. He is giving voice to the majority. So I want to share with you just a few ecosystem facts that some may surprise you and some may not, but they illuminate what is true for families in Colorado. And I'm specifically talking about our homegrown talent. So maybe a few quiz for you. Fact number 1, you won't be surprised. Our cost of living in the metro area outpaces our growth in median wages by 3 to 4 times. You can work more than one job real hard, and you will lose ground. Ready? Yell it out. For a single adult to break even in the metro area, I mean survival wage, transportation, utilities, rent, taxes. What does a single adult have to make just to break even? No Nuggets tickets, no Red Rocks, no good mountain bike. How much an hour? Single adult, you have to make 20 with benefits or you're behind every month. That means you have to make 40 grand a year on your own. This doesn't happen for 1 in 4 families in Colorado. They don't break even every month, okay? They're raising kids. For a mom, a single mom who has 2 kids, you're right, north of $30 an hour. If you're not making $65,000 a year with healthcare benefits, somebody's going without what they need. These aren't numbers that anchor us in our public discourse, but they tell us something about the choices that families have to make when they're trying to figure out the ROI on their future opportunities. Just a couple more facts, because now you're standing a while. The households that live below self-sufficiency are overwhelmingly households with kids. So all you parents, the most important and the most expensive decision you've ever made is to put the next good generation on the planet. There's an overrepresentation of single moms, right? Because the math is hard, and persons of color. But lesser known about this group is that families that live below self-sufficiency are overwhelmingly full-time employed. 80% of those households have a full-time worker. More than 2/3 have attempted some kind of post-secondary. We can see their enrollment record. We cannot find their completion record. And a full quarter of folks who do not break even in our town have 4-year degrees. So this tips us into a critical question that I think you're hearing again and again. I'm so excited about the convergence of truth here today. Given what's true about the cost of living, the pace of change in our economy, about automation, about the third Promethean moment, is the system and pathway that worked for you and I working for the next generation? And the answer is flatly no. And this is super hard to wrestle with because chances are, if you're in this room, it worked for you. It worked for me. By our analysis, if we combined all of a students' post-secondary choices after they graduate high school, all of their Colorado choices, and I mean all of them, their higher ed choices, their community college choices, their certificate choices, everything that they could decide to do, half, less than half of those choices lead to livable wages, even after 5 years and even after 10 years. And that's not just bad for students and families. It means that so many gifted, talented, passionate, excited young people never make it to you. They never get to say yes to your best jobs, the jobs that are going unfilled. So the people in the organizations that sit in talent development and talent preparation, this sector we have an enormous challenge, and it would be really wrong of us to lay that challenge at their feet when what we're asking for is not an iterative improvement. We're asking for a wholesale change in the results it produces for the majority of students and families and employers. These stakes are high. I too was going to mention this Tech Hub Now application because I've been so impressed by the people who have come to the table to put together a proposal that allows Colorado to compete for billions of dollars in economic stimulus, as long as we can convince the country that we are the next global leader in technology. We can and will outcompete every other state except for one little piece of the rubric that requires our urgent attention. And that is a solution to a scaled and inclusive skilling of our own workforce. Change at this magnitude will take all of us, and I can think of few rooms with more influence and more collective ability to do that. And so I couldn't be more pleased today to host a panel of experts who are on the front lines of leaking students with jobs, all from different places in this ecosystem. Graciously, I've asked these leaders if we could talk less today about their organizations and more about what running exceptional programs has taught them about what they really wish was true. What is in the way of getting entirely new results for students and employers, and what they would do if they could, if we all came together to help them do it. So I'd like to welcome our panelists to the stage and you to your seats. So let's open by introducing an amazing panel today. Here's your charge. 1 minute to tell us who you are and what you do, and another minute to tell us, because social mobility is more than school and skills, it's also about relationships and people who make choices. Can you tell us about someone who put a bet on you? Someone who believed in you, gave you a shot, and it changed your career. Chancellor?
Michelle Marks. I'm Chancellor, University of Colorado, Denver. It's a university, comprehensive university with bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. It's located in the heart of downtown Denver. Super proud because we are #1 in social mobility for the second year in a row in the state of Colorado, which ties into what we're doing. The person that put a bet on me, I would say, was one of my professors in college, who brought me into her research group and actually showed me that research isn't some really academic thing, but actually is a way of testing and experimenting with problems that matter. And that created an interest in going to grad school and ultimately being a lifelong educator.
Thank you. Helen, did you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Helen Young Hayes, and I am the founder and CEO of Activate Work. We provide tuition-free IT training, credentialing, employment placement, and coaching to individuals who have historically been underrepresented in the tech industry. We are all about economic mobility, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I am also the founder and board chair of the Colorado Inclusive Economy Movement. It is a CEO-led movement of racial inclusivity, diversity, and equity. Many of the CEOs and leaders, including you, Michelle, have joined this movement. We have pledged to build the most inclusive economy in the nation. So that's about me and my day jobs. And a little bit about who bet on me. I would have to say that the person who took a flyer on me was the CEO of Janus Capital, Tom Bailey. I had not grown up with any wealth or any experience in the stock market. I had a degree in economics and wanted to be a professor like my parents, but he took a flyer on me and promoted me to become a fund manager at the age of 27 with no experience, no prior experience, but just a real passion and an interest in what I was doing. And I was able to become a real trailblazer in the field of asset management globally. And I appreciate Tom and all of my white male mentors who really pushed me beyond what I thought I could do and made space for me.
Thank you, Helen. Carla?
Yes, Carla Nugent, and I'm with Wayfield Group Contracting. We're a commercial and industrial electrical contractor. I'm one of the founding partners and chief revenue officer. We're a homegrown Colorado company. We started here about 22 years ago. We've expanded in multiple territories, multiple states, and really blessed to have our people be part of some of the largest and most technical projects here in the state. I have a lot of people on my list when you ask that question, and I can think of all of my previous employers before starting Wayfield Group that tapped me on the shoulder and said, you should look at that promotion. You should go for this opportunity. Men, women worked to cross-train so that I had all these different skills, and then rallied around myself and my partners when we started Wayfield Group and said, here's a list of things you probably want to consider as you're developing this new company in a bad economy, no local relationships, and we're here to support you. So it was awesome.
Thank you each for joining us. We're going to jump in. The panel will be a little shorter, so we're going to make up some time today. I've got questions for each of you, and then an open set at the end to the degree we have time. But know as our closer, if this works out, each of you get to craft an automatically approved policy recommendation. So in the back of your minds, we want to know what it is by the end of this panel, outside of we need unlimited money forever. What do you think would make the biggest difference for students and employers if it was all going to work a lot better? Carla, this is a business conference. You are our business perspective. You're going first. So I hear a lot from the education sector, from nonprofits, we just can't get employers to the table. And in all fairness, I hear employers say, there are so many requests. They're so distributed. They're uncoordinated. There's no infrastructure that creates efficiency for us to know how to engage in this space. As my dad would say, I run a company, not a school. It's not my job to change the world. I need to make payroll. Like, given Wayfield's trailblazing, if you were to build a system for employers by employers, what would it look like?
From my experience, we've used traditional and non-traditional ways to recruit, retain talent, focusing on our people. And I would suggest connecting with so many of the community groups that do upskilling, connection. They've connected us with many employees that have career path in our company. And I'm thinking of entities like Cross Purpose, Mile High Youth Corps, Master's Apprentice, Stout Street, different organizations here on the Front Range. We work with ones out of state as well. I think of those nonprofits that offer employee assistance programs, Minds and Associates, work-life balance, those companies that are meeting the demands and the needs of employees that they look to us to fill that hole. Transportation to work, to have childcare, to have counseling services, times of crisis. There's big needs going on with our employees that we are not experts in. So it's great to connect with those community groups on that avenue. Within Wayfield Group, we've also focused on all these employee services and how do we prioritize our employees and show that we care, they have a voice. We've created a council. All of our business units, all of our states are represented in that. They're meeting with all of our job sites, all of our teams to ask what's working, what's not. That falls into our EOS model that we follow, the best practices of the book called Traction. So we're really working so we have these venues that people can speak freely to make our company better. What are our benefits going to look like? How do we convene? How do we train? How do we communicate? How do we have fun? What do we do in the community? our Wayfield University we created to support past our apprenticeship electrical program, and looking at the career of an electrician, of a virtual modeler, of an estimator, of a project manager, all the different positions we have in our company. How does somebody go through that, have additional training, and retire well? We look at how we care for our people that are in crisis. We not only are working with 100 different nonprofits each year and connecting people to purpose and volunteering, but also we have a whole segment out of our foundation that services our employees when they have times of crisis, and we give money to our own employees. So wrapping that all up into this big piece of purpose, belonging, we're focusing on people, we're connecting with the communities. I believe that's the biggest impact, one of the bigger impacts that business can make. And when we all work together, we're more powerful together.
When you think about what you've built, Carla, there are folks who have something to learn from the trailblazing that you've done. And so it makes me wonder, if you were to build a system that enables success for that connectedness between business and education, think about the infrastructure or the efficiency that would make it more than a Wayfield trailblazing moment, but one that could be true for more companies without having to go through what you went through at the front of the pack. So as you think about a system, are there one or two things that you think would help all employers be able to say yes to the kind of linkage that you have with education?
Can I talk a little bit about the program we're connecting with industry and education?
You can talk about it.
So that's where I go with this, of like, we're all working in these different silos at times, but many times we have the same needs and purpose and end goal. And within construction, we had a lot of great work going on over a 10-year period of different organizations and businesses doing this silo of work, really trying to promote stackable credentials, skilled training, getting people into our industry. And we work now to get this group together. There's about 20 different organizations that were leading this Project Scale. It's called Scaling Construction Access for Learners and Earners. We're starting in the high schools, working to teach construction education through a couple different curriculums. We're then cross-mapping that into our apprenticeships so you can get credits into apprenticeships in construction. We then have worked with the community college system to develop a new construction associate's degree that all of those all of the apprenticeships then map into, so there's no credit loss. Businesses, and we're looking at different source of funding, can then support all those apprentices to get a paid associate's degree for the most part by industry. That's super exciting for Colorado. We're working with some of the higher education groups. Here's one of them, Metro, CSU, that have construction management programs. So they are also accepting all of this work that's being done. So for the first time, big picture, we're creating this whole pipeline within our industry, hoping it can be a case use for other industries as well.
Thank you.
And might I add, I don't want to forget this piece, we are building it for the entire industry, union and non-union. And sometimes that feels like you're moving big worlds, but the more industries really look at what are our common needs, we need people, we need 300,000 workers in construction in the next 3 years. So if we don't work together and get creative and think out of the box, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Chancellor Schell, you've led the way in being outspoken for college access for first gen and underrepresented students, and you were instrumental in CU Denver being named a member of the University Innovation Alliance. It's actually a very big deal in our country. So first, thank you. And second, if you could make a college experience one that led to completion and then job placement for everyone, what change do you think would make the biggest difference?
Well, I want to start and say that CU Denver looks a little different than what people traditionally think about as the college community. Half of our students are first generation to go to college. 25% of our students are Latino, Hispanic. We were just named the first university in the Rocky Mountain region to be what's called ANAPISI, Asian American, Native American Pacific Islander, which means 10% of our students fall into those buckets. So we're very diverse. We have a lot of older students. We have a lot of vets. We have a lot of students on multiple institutional journeys, and we have a lot of commuter students, which means that we're educating the Colorado that has traditionally not gotten access to higher education. And so how I think about it, I think about when I attend a graduation and we don't ticket. I just haven't gone to my own daughter's college graduation where they ticketed and we had to make choices. And graduates are bringing 10 or 12 people who are screaming because their grandchild is the first person in the family to become an engineer, and they put all of their pressure and all of their hopes on a kid like this. That is what happens. That is what you experience. So the question is, what is it going to take to be different? And it's going to take a vision for making college affordable for all, which is an institutional issue, a state issue, and a federal issue. Yep. It is going to take making college more experiential, more work-based. At CU Denver, 85% of our students have experiential education opportunities, but as a sector, so to speak, we need to have more earn and learn, and I know we're going to talk a lot about things that are being done. College education needs to be more flexible, because a lot of our students who are working part or full-time can't take classes 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have to deliver, and using technology that we have available, we have to deliver education where students need it, when they need it, how they need it, and we now have the technology to be able to do that more seamlessly. And lastly, we need to create a sense of belongingness on campuses to make everybody feel like they are included. So those 4 things, I think, with a strong emphasis on what we're talking about today, which is career-connected education.
Yeah. Clap for this woman. Here's a hard one, and it hits at sort of the middle of what we've been talking about today. Student surveys tell us, especially first-gen and underrepresented student surveys tell us that folks choose higher ed because they're looking for a chance to make it, right? They're looking for the door to opportunity. The top freshman motivators on the national freshman surveys say that earning power and economic stability and wealth building are the top reasons for going, alongside of all of the other reasons that college conveys incredible value in our community. And my question is, are you reporting on the economic outcomes by program at CU Denver? And is this kind of information likely to become available to students so that they can discern the majors and the pathways that are best for them?
It's not a tough question for us, but it is a question that is being raised around the country right now, and I think it has been raised this morning here. And where is T-Ray right now? So I want to speak a little bit directly to T-Ray in this conversation as well, because I hear about those promises and that sense of that promise not being fulfilled, and it's certainly the narrative. At CU Denver, and really for all of the campuses in the CU system, Boulder, Colorado Springs, Denver, and Anschutz, we have had for 30 years a website that's publicly available on the CU system website that is an alumni survey of earnings. And so you can slice and dice by program, by major, by geographic region of Colorado to look at earnings data. And you can even project, if you were to major in a certain thing, what your earnings would be. And so that is publicly available information. I don't know how many people know that or use that. And you can also assess the cost information. There's also a tuition calculator and an affordability that shows that actually a public education is not as expensive as people think, yet we do have more work to do. So I think the answer is yes. The ROI conversation, it is still it is fact that people with credentials, with college degrees, frankly, an associate's, a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a doctorate, the more you earn in terms of those credentials, the more positive outcomes you have in life in terms of lifetime earnings. It is clear. In terms of health and well-being outcomes, it's a staggering difference and in terms of well-being and happiness, I think, and somebody mentioned, I think from Deloitte, in terms of what we should be thinking about. That is clear, and yet it is a major time to need to innovate at the college level, to be more career connected, to be create stronger partnerships with employers, and to deal with the affordability issue. So yes, it's a value, and yes, we need to stop having the conversation of it's one or it's no college or it's college, and start talking about how we integrate and partner together for the success of our economy and for the success of our families.
I love this. I want to come back to that last point that you made, and I also want to give Helen a chance to jump in before we open it up a little bit. Helen, quickly, you have quite a reputation in the business community, and you left it to start a nonprofit job training program. As a business leader, why did you do that? And as a parent, why did you do that?
I am the daughter of Chinese immigrants. My parents came to this country with no money, but with a fierce desire for a better life and a lifelong passion for education, which they passed on to us. Here in the US, they found the physical safety, the economic security, and the political freedom that they were looking for. And in one generation, our family became the American dream. My parents were able to send 4 kids to Yale on, I should add, work study, financial aid, parent loans, student loans. But they sent 4 of us to Yale. I got a degree in economics, had a 20-year career on Wall Street where I invested in multi-global billion-dollar companies. So I'm the American dream. But we also grew up in a very small and racist town in the Deep South, in Mississippi, in the 1960s and 70s, where my schools were not desegregated until I was in 3rd grade. And although we experienced discrimination and prejudice, it was nothing like what African Americans have experienced in terms of economic and social apartheid in the South and in other parts of this country. So I am both the embodiment of the American dream, and yet I'm a realist who has seen that the dream is out of reach for too many Americans. So what I do all day long is I fight for equity for those who are furthest from opportunity. And that's why I launched Activate Work, because I want all Coloradans to achieve their fullest potential and to acquire and succeed in the American dream if they so choose. That is why I launched Activate Work. You asked me as a parent why I do this. Inequity is not something that only impacts our community. And by the way, 80% of our Black and Latino Coloradans will not get a 4-year college degree. So we are the 3rd most educated state, and yet we are the #1 state for the gap between whites and Latinos in terms of educational attainment. This is a great state to live in, but it is not a great state that is building prosperity and opportunity for all equally. My husband is white. We have 5 grown kids. 3 of my kids are biracial, white Asian. 2 of my daughters are 100% Asian like me. It is one of the tragic facts of life that my 3 BIPOC presenting children have had and will have a different life experience from my white presenting children. I have 2 Asian daughters. They have been the subject of AAPI aggressions, threats, harassment, and this has exploded in the last 3 years. My white passing daughter will never experience this, and my 2 sons have very different life experiences. And so that is why I'm a passionate believer in creating opportunity for all, correcting inequity, and moving us all forward so that this community that we live in and this nation that we live in can fulfill its promise to all people.
We should take a moment to clap. Helen, Activate Work is one of the most proven programs, not in the state of Colorado, but in our country. Like randomized control trials, which are just hard to come by, show how much of a difference that your program makes again and again and again in terms of wage growth and job placement for folks who are too often not on that path. I know you've been building your employer network. I know you've been growing your influence. You're here today to ask for it. What keeps a program as proven as yours from serving more students? And as you answer that question, I would love it, if not yet, but close, could you help me tee up the slide? I would love it if you would answer it for your organization and then also help us see into how the public funding aspects of your growth do and don't help what you're trying to do.
First of all, I want to thank you for mentioning the 2 randomized control trials that have proven the long-term results for our learners with income increases, with decreases off of government subsidies and long-term well-being. We have a 3rd underway. We are a replication of a national model that has trained and launched 20,000 IT careers for underrepresented Americans. We serve 85% low-income individuals. We serve 69% BIPOC individuals, the majority of whom are Black and Latino. We also serve 32% women, and we serve 22% new Americans. Compared to the IT industry, we are over-indexed for Black learners and Black workers by 5x, over-indexed by 5x. And we are over-indexed for Latino workers by over 2x. So we are delivering the diversity in IT that the industry has been searching for and seeking. We do this through two ways of training, rigorous boot camps, as well as registered apprenticeships. Thank you, Catherine and team, for your assistance with us for launching these transformative apprenticeship opportunities. Our learners go from earning an average of $30,000 a year, or about $12.41 an hour, to, after a 15-week boot camp, earning $50,000 a year. After a 12-month apprenticeship, they're earning $65,000 a year. There's that income that a single mom would require.
There's our livable wage.
There's that livable wage. That's right. This is all due to the broadening of the definition of education to encompass training and learning from other sources in addition to higher ed. I should mention that UCD, Michelle and I, we are partnering to actually put into practice what we're all talking about, stackable credentials. Our software engineering boot camp is translated and articulated into course credits at UCD, and we will probably be the first in the state to announce that our software engineering apprenticeship will also translate into tangible stackable college credits moving towards, and we're going to identify exactly how individuals can get a BA with that basis. So this is the fundamental of what we do and how we do it. There are two things that hold us back. One of them is employers. I believe that employers, please hear me, please get rid of the college degree requirement. I'm just going to ask you not to limit your talent pool. Please don't limit your own talent pool. You're shooting yourselves in the foot. When you move to skills-based hiring and acquire talent through competencies, you're going to widen your talent pool. You're going to reduce your hiring time. You're going to improve your retention rates. You are going to, hiring by skills and competencies, increase the ability to predict the future success of an employee. There is no reason to slap an irrelevant degree requirement on your jobs. And so I'm asking you to really embrace skills-based hiring and alternative methods of credentialing. The other factor that is limiting our growth and our ability to serve and fill some of those 25,000 open cyber jobs and some of those 10,000 open software engineering jobs is funding. We are providing a social good. We are a nonprofit. Our training and learning and economic mobility is free to our learners. We are largely driven by philanthropy, so thank you to all of our funders who are in the room today. But we also really need the government to fund what works. And I believe that there should be alternative credentials and pathway programs that are supported like ours and like so many of the others that are represented in the room here today and in the state of Colorado that deliver living wage, thriving wage opportunities for individuals, those credentials that are all important to achieving lifetime success. And we need a reliable funding stream. May we tee up?
Yeah, so this next slide is one that has mapped all of the different public funding sources that flow to workforce training programs in the post-secondary space. And it's made possible by the Colorado Equitable Economic Mobility Initiative. Roger Lowe and Dave are right back here at this table. And I want to thank them for the suffering that went into making a visual for all of us that actually kind of helps us see what is true for folks who are trying to build, literally, they're building businesses in an ecosystem whose funding models and funding streams look like this. So I actually think there is
That's page 1.
page 1, ready? Page 1. And you might, Roger, you can yell this out if you want to, because I think there's a breakdown. These are federal that flow through our state programs. These are state. Is there one more?
I think it's 2 pages. So we have $700 million in federal funding that's going to workforce training in the state of Colorado. Workforce training and financial aid. But to access them, individuals would have to navigate, we call this the spaghetti chart of workforce development. Employers would have to navigate the spaghetti chart, and training providers have to navigate the spaghetti chart. So I believe that what we really need is to fund programs that work, that generate a true ROI on education and training equitably. The Denver taxpayers just voted to approve and expand the definition and the awarding of Pell Grants to training providers like Activate Work and others who are providing economic mobility to individuals. So broadening the definition of training and education and expanding access to many, many other Coloradans. That's what we need.
Thank you. We have a little less time than we thought we did. But because this is an employer setting, I'm really curious about a potentially divergent set of opinions, frankly. Here is the statement, and then agree or disagree. Employers deserve financial incentives to participate in the talent development space with education. Carla?
I know so many businesses that are champions of workforce and do so much outside of the system. It would be nice to see us work together, and it would be nice to be able to tap into some grants and different funding. I think I see some of these new things that are coming out and great innovation for our state, and I see employers over here not necessarily knowing how to connect. So there is this disconnect, and I see opportunity to, again, when we work together, we're more powerful instead of being separate.
Well, there are so many effective partnerships that exist in today's world. I could probably mention 50 of them just on our campus alone. The challenge is, how do we scale the production of talent? So it's not necessarily the partnership problem, but it's the scaling talent in an equitable and affordable way problem. And for that, Carla's example, the work that she's done within the construction sector, I think is a model. I have been a part of other coalitions in other parts of the country where we bring together employers and education institutions of all types that work collectively on identifying the skills to enable new employees and to hit the ground running, and we collaborate. And in those cases, it has worked because there is such a collective need to provide a strong and durable talent pipeline for the area. So whether that takes incentive we don't have that as much in Colorado. I think there's a great potential. I think some of the work that the state is doing is incentivizing that. And I think if that works, that's a terrific thing for Colorado.
I would agree. I believe that the state could divert some of the workforce dollars in training that it is already spending in the form of $490 million total, both in federal and in state workforce spending and training, and divert those to apprenticeship, for example, to make apprenticeship easier for all of you. I believe that it is all of our collective responsibility to develop our talent. Gone are the days when business could simply be a consumer of talent, where you could look at talent and, as if you were at a retail store, pick it off of the shelf. We have to get involved in developing our talent. This is our mandate and our mission to keep a thriving economy going. I just returned from Switzerland with the delegation. Eve was there, several others here were there. Carly, you were there, right? And it was so inspiring because both education, government, and industry believe it is their responsibility to build the skilled workforce that they need. Here, we put the onus of credentialing and education on the individual, resulting in college debt, 1.7 trillion in the nation of college debt, and often no degree completion with that college debt. The Swiss spend collectively between government and industry 11.6 billion on apprenticeship over a population of 8.7 million. We are a population of 5.7 million, and we've spent cumulatively, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 35 million in apprenticeship in the state of Colorado. And apprenticeship is 80% of the Swiss workforce. It's 0.18% of the Colorado workforce. We have such an opportunity to drive apprenticeship, which, by the way, is individuals who get paid to learn and to receive credentials. So I believe that because the burden of training and education in apprenticeship is falling on industry, I believe that there should be very modest incentives that are already being allocated to workforce training providers should be allocated to apprenticeship, to make apprenticeship easy and to help our employers and our workers get to those living wage opportunities.
We are inside our last 10 minutes. And so I want to give each of you your promised invitation to give us the public policy that you think makes the biggest difference for the ultimate result we are seeking for our young people, actually all our people, and for employers. So in about 2.5 minutes or so, tell us what public policy move you think could make the biggest difference to shift at the system level the results that we're getting today.
I'm going to jump in and get to that recommendation, but I think we're missing one fundamental part of this conversation about college and about work and about the future of work. And that is that as careers change, and the Deloitte presentation we heard with AI, we haven't talked about AI, but thinking about how that's going to change. I mean, we don't even know what the jobs, all of our jobs are going to look like in 5 years. They'll surely be different than they are today. And so what is important about college, especially about the experience that happens before you start a career? They are durable skill development, not the coding skill. Coding skills are very important. We are doing a lot, and I am all in support of work-based learning experiences. And it's not enough. It's not enough because those experiences are good to get a first job. But when we talk about what it's going to take for all of you looking around the room, likely the majority of you have significant educational experience, is things that are innately human. It's the human side, and jobs are, as we heard this morning, are only going to get more human. Only going to get more human. So the problem solving, the critical thinking, the ability to ask the right questions, managing complicated projects, empathy, cultural competence, and understanding. And that is what I call, some people call it the soft skills, which I think are really hard. That is why you might hire people for skill, but you tend to fire them because they don't have that. And so if you think about who has not succeeded or where you or somebody has not succeeded, it is that. And so when we fully have the conversation about thinking about how we develop competitive talent for Colorado, we must think about how we create a citizenry that we want to be a part of building our communities, our rural environments, our cities, our state, our nation, our global competitiveness. It depends on this. I'm not saying college is the only place to get it, but it's often forgotten as we think about it's good enough to give people to get people to do a first job in coding. A first job tends to be very technical. So my policy recommendation is that I would like us to think from a policy perspective about how we incorporate the important emphasis of earn and learn and experience with a college experience in this form of stackable credentials. It's exactly what Helen was talking about. There are some great examples that are happening right now so that we don't have it's not college or it is college, but we can think about lifelong learning that develops both the hit the job running skills that employers need and the durable skills that will help individuals. We create an inclusive economy because all individuals are invited to prepare themselves for a career that's likely going to have 14 jobs in it.
We hereby pass your policy. We pass your policy. Okay, passed.
I agree with the importance of durable skills, 100%. And college and also actually work is where you can learn durable skills. So I did want to point that out. My policy proposal really is, I would love to see the pathways to prosperity to be widened. Currently, I see us with a narrow ladder, a vertical ladder of opportunity. And unfortunately, that's not serving 70% of Coloradans who are not acquiring and not opting into or can't afford to acquire those credentials and degrees and certifications. And I'm very much a credential first. Let's get people in the workforce, let's get them employed, and then let's let them at their leisure build other skills, add on to that. The policy proposal that I would recommend, therefore, is something that I would envision turning that narrow ladder of educational success, which leads to economic mobility. I'd like to expand our thinking so that we think of it more as a rock climbing experience, so that individuals can, instead of looking for only the vertical handholds with education and a 4-year college degree requirement, they can look for that diagonal handhold. And they won't lose the elevation if they choose to work and get work-based learning and work-based certifications. They might move laterally, but I really believe that what we want is to widen the pathways so that we create superhighways of prosperity, and that really includes expanding the definition of education and training and expanding employers' behavior so that we are also not narrowly defining talent. The one policy proposal that I would therefore put forward is doing what we have already seen done in Denver County, which is expanding the definition of workforce training and development education to include organizations that are driving living wages and driving economic mobility through credentialing and through alternative methods of education. And I believe that we should also focus on really expanding the way that we're serving Coloradans so that we can look at individuals who might be mid-career, but they need to make a big jump. And how can they afford training or credentialing or education equitably and serving adults as well as youth, serving more disabled individuals, et cetera. So I would like to see us expand our definitions so that we look at workers as lifelong earners and learners, seamlessly moving into and out of education, training, employment, and ultimately getting to economic thriving.
Thank you.
We've seen a lot of our high schools being creative and thinking outside of the box of how do we get our students, our children, to have this career pathing, livable wages, and all these different stackable credentials, different avenues of education to have a good job. And I do see our schools creating great partnerships with businesses, creating great partnerships with post-secondary education institutions, but it's different. Some are PTAC schools, some are STEM schools. They all have these different focuses, and we don't have kind of a governing body, maybe governance isn't the right word, but that's really coordinating our schools so that we look at what are the top handful of demand industries here in Colorado, and how are we consistently educating those in-demand jobs in our high schools and connecting to apprenticeships, to stackable credentials, to associate's degrees. Whatever makes sense for that specific degree, we need to start teaching our kids to be learners. There's jobs I think that my kids might be in that aren't even created yet. And so having our schools work together, you'll see this common theme. I hate when we work in silos. We can be so much powerful together and really talking about these in-demand jobs. And Colorado hasn't done it in a long time. We haven't talked about these middle skilled jobs and jobs that are a pathway to a great paying career. So having that working together on the education system and really focusing on those in-demand jobs and have it to where a kid can go to any different school. I can transfer and I don't lose my pathway. I can transfer into this college, I can transfer into this apprenticeship program, and that stackability, which we've been learning in the Switzerland model, they can transfer. You don't lose that. We lose it here in Colorado.
I hope that you are as impressed by the through lines today, especially among these panelists who do this work differently as I am. And I'll do my best to summarize like in our last 2 minutes, because I would want everyone here to feel a moment that you have to be a part of in order to change. So I think our community's work, frankly, is to dignify all work, to dignify pathways to livable wages, to make it okay to say yes to the thing that allows you to move the next step forward and the next step forward and to have a choice-filled life so that you have even more opportunities to go back to school for higher education your entire lifetime because you have the economic stability and the strong starting point. Employers, you have such influence because you are the demand side of this equation. We're all trying to get to you. So you do have power over livable wages. You do have power over how you partner with the educational sectors and systems to make work-based learning part of how learning works. You have such power to reduce the barriers to employment and prosperity for our community. Take those steps. The state has such an opportunity to think about how it is that we prioritize funding for programs that have evidence of real impact for students. Can we pay for the things that students say that they want? Can we pay for the things that employers want? And for higher education and training pathways, I can't tell you how lifted I am today to leave this panel having heard a leader of this stature say that in the higher ed setting, we want to live in a world where earning and learning is part of how we think about credentials that are not just skill-based, but in fact lead to the durable problem-solving, soft, hard skills that actually allow people to persist in their careers. And if we can erase this line between I have to do work or I have to do higher ed and I find myself on a path that excludes the other, it seems to me that that path that excludes is the one that's actually keeping so many of our young people from feeling like they actually did have a choice. And so for you to blend those worlds and to make work matter to higher ed, I think could be transformational to the way all of us think about what opportunity is built on. And I want to thank you for leaning in. And thank you for hosting our panel today.
You want to come on up too, Scott? Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Debbie Brown, the president of Colorado Business Roundtable. I'm joined with Scott LeBand, the president of Colorado Succeeds. And we've had an exciting morning already. We're gonna give a few short remarks before we serve lunch here today. So on behalf of Colorado Business Roundtable, I don't want to out myself to Julie, but we do represent large employers. And I'm sure many of you are in the room today. We're the national affiliate of the roundtable based in Washington, D.C. that works really closely with federal policy that happens here in our country to help make sure U.S. is competitive. In Colorado, we do the same thing. We work on issues that keep Colorado competitive, not just in terms of the businesses that we represent, but we also represent employers from academia, community, and government that all work together under the alignment that business is a force for good. So we're excited to be in the room today. This is the 4th year, I think, that we've held this type of an event, focusing particularly on workforce. It should come as no surprise to those of you in the room, workforce is the #1 issue facing employers. It was before COVID. It is with even more gasoline poured on top after COVID. So it's very important for us to collaborate today together on ways that we can understand the future of work, particularly energized by the Deloitte presentation at the beginning, really giving us kind of the global perspective. And then we've dug down into deeper Colorado perspective as well. I don't know if you saw the recent CNBC survey this week that ranks state competitiveness. This is something I pay attention to because I have colleagues in other states that run roundtables similar to mine. And we get on the phone and we compare. And Michigan has been trying to get into the top 10 for years. They've been very diligent about it, and now they're in the top 10. But the bad news is Colorado went from #4 to #11. So I'm not happy about that on this type of state competitiveness ranking. The #1 weight to the ranking is based on workforce, looking at robust systems for each state, strong community college systems, strong traditional higher ed, whether there's talent producing systems outside of what we see in the traditional opportunities that are available, and what kind of pathways we as a state have to make sure that we can train, retrain, attract, and keep the workforce that we need to make sure Colorado's competitive. So again, on behalf of Colorado Business Roundtable, we're excited to be partnering today. We're looking forward to a really good discussion in a little bit. I'm sensing like if we had T-Swift here, that would make it a little more exciting. But for those of us who like workforce issues, it's really exciting to get the collaboration that we have together today. So with that, I also want to just give a quick thank you before I turn the mic over to Scott to our boards of directors for both Colorado Business Roundtable Board. I see a handful of you large employers. I want to point you out in case people want to come talk to you about your hiring needs. And then also the board for Colorado Succeeds. We appreciate your long-term investment in the missions of our organizations. And I also want to thank our sponsors today. You've seen some of those flash up on the board as well that help make this event possible and invest in what we're doing. So again, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Debbie.
Good.
First off, for all of you still wearing a sports coat, I see you and I feel you. We figured we'd put this issue under the magnifying glass today, and the best way to do that was put all of us in a room that felt like we were under a magnifying glass today. So thank you for joining us. We're really grateful that you're here. Extremely grateful to the Colorado Business Roundtable for this opportunity to partner. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Colorado Succeeds, we have a simple vision in our state. It's that all kids are educated to their greatest potential and that all companies have the homegrown talent they need to thrive. Importantly, we think about it in that order. And you could kind of think about it as make Colorado the best place to raise a child and grow a business. That sounds like a state that I want to be a part of, and I know that is the same for you as well. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate your attendance here. It speaks volumes about your commitment to this issue. But I also really want to take a minute to thank our speakers who just really shared a lot of courage, vulnerability, authenticity, and candor in what they offered this morning. And so if you could, just please join me in another round of applause for our speakers this morning. As we work to understand the future of work, I think we're starting to learn more and more that begins in our schools and that it continues throughout post-secondary education, traditional, non-traditional, and into the workforce. And so there's so many opportunities to deepen our understanding on this topic, and that's why we're excited to have so many different speakers representing all of those different constituencies and stakeholders, whether it be learners, job seekers, employers, education providers, to help us round out our understanding and to really build a more complete picture of what's happening. And so through these conversations today, we hope to unlock a little bit more understanding about the complexity of the issue that we're facing, but also identify opportunities for collaboration. I think there's a lot of convergence that's starting to happen in the room this morning, and I certainly believe that there's more ahead. So before we get into that, though, I think it's time for a very well-earned and well-deserved break. And so invite you all to take a minute stretch. We have about a 20-minute networking break. Encourage you to step away from your seats as we'll bring lunch in. And so go outside in the chilly 90-degree weather and find some shade or mix in the lobby. But more importantly, get to know some of the other people here, because these are the folks that are going to make all of the ideas that we're surfacing today possible. Thanks again.
When we bring together partners from academia, business, community, and government, we talk about reimagining Colorado's workforce. And this includes traditional talent producers like institutions of higher education. It also includes skills-based jobs. And then there's other disruptors in this space that are seeking to grow talent and make sure Coloradans have a pathway to success.
Well, the workforce issue matters to me because it's the key to everything we do. It doesn't matter how intensively technological your business is, it's still all about people.
College 300 years ago used to be for small numbers of people to get educated and lead the masses. Today, we need so many more people educated and involved in the workforce.
Reimagining the workforce is important to our industry because there is such a lack of skilled tradespeople. And my goal is to make the pool of talent bigger.
It's so important to have diversity in the workforce, 100%. We all come from different places. So being able to have someone that doesn't look like you, someone who doesn't think like you, in your teams, in your organizations, it makes such a difference.
So I see our biggest challenges right now here as an employer in Colorado, and our biggest opportunity, it's all around people. Being in construction, we're not outsourcing the work that we're doing. We can have technology and automation and prefabrication, but ultimately, people, great people, build our communities and build our cities.
You know, there's been a lot of challenges finding the people that we need to do the work that we have. Don't necessarily always have the right people and right skill sets in Colorado, and you know, that's a challenge I think lots of folks are grappling with, and our higher ed institutions are grappling with, you know, what kind of skills do they need to be providing so that when kids hit the employment market, they are employable right off the bat. And so that's probably been the biggest challenge for us, frankly.
Every kid in Colorado that's born in this state and lives in this state deserves to be educated to their greatest potential. And so as a business community, it's up to us to make sure that they have those opportunities in our state. And at the same point in time, every company that's in Colorado needs to have the homegrown talent and the local talent that it needs to grow and thrive. And so the business community plays a critical role in that as well. And so there's both a moral imperative to this work and an economic imperative to this work.
Hello, Colorado. Good afternoon. All right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks. Appreciate that. I know you all are enjoying your lunch. My name is Rob Haynes, and I am honored to represent the Boeing Company and Boeing Global Engagement here in the state of Colorado. This is my home, and I'm so honored today to welcome and introduce the Vice President and the leader for Boeing Global Engagement, Sherry Carter. I have a couple minutes, so I did have some prepared remarks thanking Scott and Debbie and the incredible teams with Colorado Succeeds and the Colorado Business Roundtable. But I also like to take a moment to thank Dave Eddy. You heard from him earlier. Dave, thank you for your 35 years with the Boeing Company. 35 years, a commitment to education and business in Colorado, and thank you for your friendship. It means a lot. So thank you, Dave. He's a great ambassador for Boeing here in the state of Colorado. Everywhere that I go, Dave is always there. He invites me to about 20 events a week, 20 different speaking engagements that he's been invited to, and he's been the face of Boeing for so long. So today I'm incredibly proud to stand here and introduce each of you to the leader of Boeing Global Engagement, Sherry Carter. Boeing has about 150,000 employees in over 100 countries, and Sherry leads all of Boeing's charitable giving, community relations, and employee engagement around the globe. So it's a real honor to have her take the time to visit us here in Colorado today. I'm working here because Sherry recognized the importance that Colorado has, and we're leading the nation when it comes to aerospace. We're #1 per capita. California, as Dave says, has more engineers, but we're #1 per capita when it comes to the aerospace industry. And Colorado is where space exploration begins. Sherry believes that Boeing Global Engagement needs someone here on the ground to work with you all, to listen to your concerns, to work with the business community, higher education, and community leaders. And so I've been really honored to be here for the past year. I'm not going to read Sherry's bio verbatim, but Sherry has served at the senior levels of the White House. She was the first executive director of the PBS Foundation, where she led the support for PBS in its mission, serving the nation's 348 non-commercial television stations that reach over 90 million people every week. Sherry has extensive experience in public affairs and global development, including positions with the Department of Commerce, the Presidential Inaugural Committee, the Astronauts Memorial Foundation, the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. And Sherry, this is not in her bio, but she was the driving force for the private funds and public funds that raised all the money for the iconic Institute of Peace, just steps from the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And if you haven't seen that building, next time you're in D.C., please go visit it, because it's a beautiful, iconic building just right off the mall. Sherry is called on by leaders and organizations around the globe and is passionate about international affairs, music, the arts, humanities, and it's important to note that she is just as comfortable in a room full of volunteers and those serving others in need as she is in a room full of dignitaries or celebrities. Sherry is proud to be from Georgia. She's equally proud of her national championship Georgia Bulldog. Go Dogs! I think our new coach at the University of Colorado might give you a run for your money in a couple of years, maybe. But Sherry is proud to be from Georgia. She's as genuine and authentic as anyone I've ever worked with in my entire career, going about 25 years now. And it's just a real honor to have her in Colorado. She calls her parents every single day, which is something I told her I'd try to get better at that, calling my parents, work on it and see them as often or talk to them as often as I can. But Sherry is at home wherever she goes, and she came to Colorado without hesitation. She travels all around the world, but I invited her here, and Dave invited her here, and she wanted to be here because she truly loves Colorado. She loves our partnership, Boeing's partnership with the United States Air Force Academy and the 4,000 cadets that serve down in Colorado Springs. She loves the beauty of not just the mountains of Colorado, but the hearts of our people. And I'm proud today to welcome her back to our home, Colorado. We're going to watch a short video about Boeing Global Engagement, and then I'd like each of you to welcome me in joining the Vice President of the Boeing Company and the leader of Boeing Global Engagement, Sherry Carter.
Wake up, storming, grounded, morning for something bigger, deeper than I've ever known. So I'm learning, I'm giving, observing somebody else that's not me. Go wherever my purpose goes. Whoa. It's like I've never touched the sky. Whoa. This is what it means to fly. Whoa. Whoa. This is what it means to fly. Whoa. This is what it means to fly. This is what it means. This is what it means to fly. Oh, this is what it means to fly. Underneath the sinking sky. This is what it means to fly. Whoa, whoa. This is what it means to fly. Whoa, this is what it means. This is what it means to live. What it means to love. What it means to spread our wings and fly. This is what it means to fly.
Scott knows I'm a crier. I love my job so much. It's Sherry Carter.
Wow, we've just launched that video. We launched it with our board of directors recently because, you got to tell your story. And I think that video really tells a lot about what we did in 2022. But I am so honored to be here. Good morning. I think it's going into afternoon now. But I'm so happy to be here in Colorado. It's just an absolute pleasure. When Dave and Rob asked me to come, there was no doubt I was going to figure out a way to work it out. I had a moment where I wondered if I could do it because I had made a promise to my mom, but she changed her mind. So then I was able to get on a plane and come out. And I think that this video really does show how the Boeing Company is engaged in communities all over the globe the past year. It highlights a small sampling of our global charitable impact and employee volunteerism efforts from 2022. So as the Vice President of Boeing Global Engagement, my focus is on leading our company's corporate philanthropy programs and initiatives. And I firmly believe that in this increasingly interconnected world, community engagement has taken on a new level of significance. I'm also noticing and truly welcome the sentiment that it is increasingly emphasized by the younger generations entering the workforce. It is no longer enough for companies to focus solely on making a profit. We must actively participate and contribute to the communities in which we operate. And that will play a major role in the future of work. Community engagement builds trust, fosters loyalty, and creates a positive impact on society. The future of work demands that companies understand the importance of community engagement and that we integrate it into our core strategies. At Boeing, we have more than a century of experience in community engagement and philanthropy. In fact, it's in our DNA. It was 1917 when Bill Boeing made his first charitable contribution to the University of Washington to create a wind tunnel used for aviation research. Yesterday, I was down in Colorado Springs at the Space Foundation, and they've got a wind tunnel that they're talking to a lot of students about. So it really resonated with me, this moment in time when our founder, Bill Boeing, made his first charitable investment. That was 1917. Since then, just as we innovate our Boeing products to meet customer needs and challenges in the global marketplace, we're committed to continuing to innovate and invest in efforts that build, enhance, and contribute to the communities we call home around the globe. In 2022, Boeing and its employees invested $197 million and volunteered 366,000 hours in support of communities. And over the past 10 years, we've invested approximately $2 billion in our local communities, a data point that we're all incredibly proud of. Anchored by local and regional employee engagement activities, Boeing charitable investments are organized around 3 pillars. Our future, geared toward developing tomorrow's innovators by investing in the skills required in today's modern workplace. Our heroes, supporting military veterans and their families transitioning back to civilian life. And our homes, adapting to local needs everywhere we live and work, encouraging environmental stewardship, advancing racial equity and social justice. As a global company, we do not only seek to attract the best global workforce, but we see it as our responsibility to also help develop the workforce of the future. We do so by supporting STEM education and workforce development programs that inspire the next generation of innovators. In 2022, we contributed approximately $50 million across 444 grants in support of STEM education and workforce development programs. Through programs like Dream Learners, Future You, First Robotics, Newton Rooms, Think Young, Soar with Your Dreams, and Destination Mars, we introduce young minds to the wonder of aerospace and technology. It's through programs like this and by bringing STEM topics alive through connecting concepts with real-world challenges that we believe we can motivate kids to dare to address those challenges. And we want them to be part of the solution. The second pillar of our strategy is to partner with leading veterans organizations to provide veterans, their families, and caregivers with essential workforce transition support and recovery and rehabilitation programs that address mental health and advance well-being. I'm so incredibly proud of the work we are doing in this space. In 2022, Boeing provided $13.3 million across 116 grants in support of veterans organizations globally. At Boeing, our duty is to give back to veterans, a theme that holds true here in Colorado, where 370,000 military veterans live, making up 13% of the total workforce. Last year, through our partnership with Homes for Our Troops, Boeing was proud to present the keys to a brand new home to U.S. Navy Hospital Corpsman Joel Booth in Morrison, Colorado. Through this special partnership, Boeing has helped wounded heroes move into adapted homes that are accommodating to their specific physical needs. As Rob mentioned, we're also very, very proud of our long-standing partnership with the Air Force Academy, its leadership, and most importantly, those cadets. The Air Force Academy cadets embody the spirit of courage, dedication, and excellence. The Academy provides them with a world-class education while also preparing them for a career of service. And many of them will one day fill roles flying and operating Boeing military aircraft. Within our third pillar, we focus on the unique local community needs in the many regions of the globe where our company operates. In Colorado, that includes a focus on environmental programs and advancing racial equity and social justice at all levels across the state and around the country. Personally, I'm very proud of the work we are doing with a local nonprofit partner that I've gotten to know when I got here yesterday and just today met some more of their wonderful staff members, Activate Work. I know the founder, Helen Young Hayes, spoke this morning. And Helen, I just want to thank you for your leadership. We're very proud of our partnership with you. Activate Work is an organization that helps underemployed members of our community find a career path that they can be passionate about. And recently, they have partnered with Jeppesen, a Boeing company that has 1,200 employees right here in Colorado. The Activate Work program offers instructional courses that cover hard skill development, ranging from IT support and software engineering to soft skill development like financial literacy. Black, Indigenous, and people of color make up less than 16% of the tech industry. Boeing and Activate Work are committed to increasing that number and achieving more diverse representation in the aerospace industry, and we thank you for the partnership. At Boeing's core, we are a technology and innovation company. We understand that technological advancements and disruptive innovations are reshaping industries at an unprecedented pace. To thrive in this ever-changing landscape, we have made it a priority to invest in cutting-edge technologies and foster a culture of innovation within our organization. By embracing emerging technologies like AI, automation, data analytics, we ensure that we remain at the forefront of our industry, delivering groundbreaking solutions that meet with the evolving needs of our customers and our society. We're also preparing the next generation to be skilled in the jobs of tomorrow, and our investments in education don't stop at graduation. We're intently focused on continuing our support in higher education. Whether it be four-year universities, community colleges, technical trade schools, all are undergoing a significant transformation in response to the demands of the future of work. Traditional career trajectories are being disrupted, and new skills are high in demand. Our team has seen this shift and recognizes the need to invest in higher ed to shape the incoming workforce and equip them with the skills of the future. Through our work, we are expanding opportunities that help students build critical skills in industry-related areas of study in order to develop workforce-ready talent and increase lasting diversity within the aerospace industry. With a strategic and collaborative approach, we prioritize programs and partnerships that support individuals from economically disadvantaged backgrounds and military-connected students. At four-year universities, community colleges, and tech schools, Boeing is supporting curriculum development, student organizations, scholarships, career-connected student projects, outreach and retention programs. Through our focus on higher ed, we are growing a diverse and robust talent pipeline that is key to addressing critical workforce needs in the aerospace, manufacturing, and technology industries, and is a key driver of economic growth in our communities, building stronger communities. Our employees help amplify Boeing's charitable investments around the world. And as I mentioned before, in 2022, Boeing employees donated more than $663.6 million, and more importantly, contributed those 366,000 volunteer hours, bringing the total employee giving to more than $478 million over the last 10 years, which is truly incredible. It's an impressive figure, a figure that more often than not captures a job applicant's attention. Because in an increasingly competitive job market, attracting and retaining top talent requires more than just a competitive salary or attractive benefits package. Today's workforce seeks purpose, meaning, a sense of fulfillment in their careers. They want to be part of an organization that is making a positive impact on society. Companies that actively engage in and promote community service activities and investment not only enhance their brand, but also attract talented individuals who align with their values. At Boeing, we understand more and more every day the importance of community service and employee engagement as key drivers of recruitment. That's why this past year we launched Boeing Cares Volunteer Corps, a group of like-minded and civic-minded employees who contribute to their communities through volunteerism and philanthropic activities. Through our Volunteer Corps program, we are creating a sense of pride, purpose, and belonging, making us an employer of choice for the workforce of tomorrow. In fact, this past Earth Month, our local Boeing Volunteer Corps were out on the streets of Denver, working with Denver Urban Gardens to create an urban food garden to ensure that those in need have access to well-rounded meals that include fresh produce. Before I conclude, I want to thank you all for inviting me here today, even as hot as it is here. But as they say, it's a dry heat. The future can oftentimes seem daunting and uncertain, especially coming out of the pandemic times. But conversations like the ones we're having here today and that you've been having all morning and will continue, and the actions we are taking back to our respective companies and industries are preparing us well for the future. And let me tell you, the future and the future of work looks very bright to me and to all of my colleagues at Boeing. As we navigate the complexities of the future of work, we will embrace the opportunities it brings. And together, we will build a future where innovation, collaboration, and social responsibility drive our actions. And Boeing will be there with you at the forefront, committed to these principles and dedicating ourselves to making a positive impact on our communities, here in Denver especially, shaping the incoming workforce and pushing the boundaries of what is possible. So thank you again for having me here. Let us embark on this exciting journey into the future of work together. Thank you.
Sherry and Boeing, thank you so much for your partnership with our organizations and for this event today. I think it's clear that your commitment and leadership on this topic is something to be marveled at, and clearly we are all inspired by what you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. We're bringing up Michael Itzkowitz. He's the founder and president of the Higher Education Advisory Group. He has over a decade of experience in federal education policy, and he's held senior roles inside and outside of government. Prior to founding the HEA Group, Michael worked as a presidential appointee in the Obama administration in the U.S. Department of Education, assuming several roles in K-12 education and in higher education. Michael is a distinguished researcher and will now shed light on the big question that many of us have been asking this morning: what do we know about the return on investment of these different education and training programs? And how do they help us understand the pathways to economic mobility and to economic security? And so with that, please join me in welcoming Michael to the stage.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Hi, I'm Michael. Nice to meet you all. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone here today, and I'm going to be talking a lot about return on investment in higher education. Something I've been working on for about the past 10 years, and really focusing on the value that colleges and college programs provide to our students across the country. So I'm just going to share a little bit of research, and hopefully it's helpful to you all. 5,986 college programs, 353,326 graduates. Those are the amount of college programs and college graduates that graduate from programs, but are ultimately earning less than a typical high school graduate a few years after they've completed their program of study. If you can see the chart, the red or the orange is not so good. It's the not so good column. 16% of all college programs fit this. 16% of all students that graduate from these programs fit this. Now, if you can see the total amount of students within this sample made available through the US Department of Education, this is all data from the US Department of Education. You can also see that it's about 2 million students, 2.2 million students in the sample. As you all probably know, there are a lot more students enrolled in higher education today. So if you wanted to do the math, you can see that this is actually in the millions of students who graduate from these programs, but ultimately earn less than the typical high school graduate. And I know that's been something that we've been talking about a lot today. And what should students earn? What should they expect out of college? So I'm going to talk about one way that I've looked at this. It doesn't mean that it's the right way, but I hope that it's a simplified way. And it's a way that's been getting picked up within federal policy circles as one way to evaluate whether or not students are getting value out of their higher education experience. The way that I defined something in, I guess, 2020, which is now 3 years ago, wow, was something called the price to earnings premium. And the thing that I was thinking about at the time was, if stock analysts can evaluate the value of a stock pretty easily using a price to earnings metric, why can't we do something similar in higher ed? Why don't families and students ultimately be able to at least know the amount of opportunity and or risk that they will have once making the largest investments in their entire life behind getting a mortgage? And you can feel free to gasp at this or make noises. I have a lot of time here. You can yell out things, whatever you want. I'm not allowed questions and answers, so just start yelling things. Why is this so important? Someone said this before. We've seen surveys years after year. The number one reason, whether we like it or not, that students attend an institution of higher education nowadays is for a better financially secure, better employability, and to have a financially secure future. There are so many other intangible benefits and reasons why students attend college. But if we think about the number one reason why they do, that's it. And I'm a sociology major, okay? So I'm not diving into business here and saying that that's the only route. I do have a business minor. But this is the number one reason, and it's something that we should all be very concerned about. From a federal taxpayer perspective, beyond the students, it's gigantic. $110 billion a year flows to students, indirectly to institutions, through the form of federal Pell Grants and federal loans. This is each and every single year. So as a taxpayer, that's also something that we should be extremely concerned about to help ensure that these dollars are used effectively and efficiently. If we can think about some of the investments that we've heard today, which are gigantic. We just heard Sherry talk about Boeing and the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've been putting in through private industry. This is the federal government, and we have $110 billion just in this little bucket of Pell Grants and federal loans. It's a huge bucket that we need to think about, how that's being used. Why is this of concern to students? We've seen the cost of college continue to rise exponentially throughout the past 40 years. We hear, I worked in DC for a while, so we hear our Congress people talk, back in my day, tuition used to cost $50 a credit. Well, it doesn't cost $50 a credit anymore. It costs a lot more. And it's of concern, and that's okay, as long as we're getting a return out of that investment. And that's one piece of the puzzle, albeit a very important piece. This has started to gain traction, not just because I'm so amazing at my job and I've been making the best research, But there was also a little pandemic that happened a year or two ago, where we've heard anecdotal stories of, I'm working from my parents' basement on my computer, paying $12,000 a year to get a degree. Why am I paying this? Is this worth it? Tuition really didn't go down at the time. I mean, everyone was sort of still paying the same thing, yet working from, quote unquote, their parents' basement. So these things have started to pick up steam, and I think that it's been helpful in the sense of we need to think about the value that these things provide to us. And like I said, I created something called the price to earnings premium metric, which was a way to look at whether or not students are getting value out of whatever college they choose to attend or whatever degree they wish to pursue. And those are both two very important things. So the price to earnings premium essentially looks at the time it takes the students to recoup their educational costs. And the way that it does this, now that Sherry's out of the room, we can talk about University of Georgia. Go Gators. Let's just say, hypothetically, the University of Georgia costs about $15,000 a year out of pocket to get your degree. And that's that's on average, essentially, for a four-year institution. So if you were to give colleges the benefit of the doubt, and I know Sherry probably graduated in like 3.5 years, but let's just say they graduate in 4 years. It usually takes students a bit longer, right? It usually takes about 5.1 years to earn their four-year degree, according to the National Student Clearinghouse. But let's just say it takes them 4 years on average. That $15,000, if you can do the math, would be $60,000 to obtain your four-year degree, right? That's a pretty hefty investment. And that's out-of-pocket costs. That's after all scholarships, after all grants. This is what you're paying out of pocket. That's how much it costs. And that's pretty much on average across the United States. But now, let's say that you earn $20,000 a year more than the typical high school graduate after you graduate from the University of Georgia, right? So we know how much in this state high school graduates make with no college experience. Let's say you make $20,000 a year more than that. That's your earnings premium. So in order to recoup those $60,000, you earn $20,000 more, it takes you about 3 years to recoup your educational costs. Right? Simple. Good, got it. Pretty good. That's pretty good if you can do that. That's a good outcome. Within 0 to 5 years, I would say it's a pretty good outcome. And now we can look at this for colleges, and we can look at it even for college programs. So here's just giving an example. Looking at, let's just say, California State, we can see that those students are making about $20,000 a year, more than the typical high school graduate in California. It costs them $12,000 a year, 4 years. It's an affordable college. They're going to be able to recoup their costs in less than a year. That's an extremely good outcome. When we think about Liberty, which is a private institution located in Virginia, we can see that it is a lot more expensive, as a lot of private colleges are. It takes $101,000 to earn a four-year degree. A little over $25,000 a year out of pocket, on average, to earn your four-year degree. They're making $11,700 more than a typical high school graduate in Virginia. If you're to do the math, it would take them about 8.7 years to recoup those educational costs. It takes a little bit longer, right? But it's still less than 10 years. So let's just say it is what it is. And I'll leave it to you to make your value judgments on what's good or what's bad. Then we have Martin University. Who graduated from there? I'm just joking. It costs a lot, right? All these cost a lot. Okay, let's just be real. They cost a lot. $70,000 for a four-year degree. The majority of students, this is the median for our math folks in the room, the majority of students are earning $300 less than the typical high school graduate in Indiana. 10 years after they've enrolled in the institution. This is the longest time I can go with department data. 10 years later, they're still earning less than the typical high school graduate. Within my work, I consider that to be no economic ROI. Now, some of you smart people will say, well, they are going to earn more, Mike, later on, and they will. But this is the way that I do it as one way. Okay, you can take a number of things into account. You can look at opportunity costs of not working while you're in college, and guess what? These numbers aren't going to get better. They're going to get worse. So there's a couple trade-offs I did. And, oops. But college and what you study in college is oftentimes even more important than the college you went to, as you all probably know, right? Sociology degree, good luck, kid. But if you study finance, now I happen to use the University of Denver. Why not? Well, they invited us. They have pretty good outcomes sometimes. But you can see that there's a lot of different outcomes here, and it depends on what you study, and it doesn't mean something's good, it doesn't mean something's bad, but it's worth knowing what you're getting into and the different kind of salary range that you're going to be usually making, at least former students, before you enter a college program at an institution. That sounds fair, right? Whether I want to become a teacher or a sociologist or whatever that is. I'm not a sociologist. Or whatever it is, or study finance. So we can see that finance majors at the University of Denver, in this example, they make $35,000 beyond the typical high school graduate in Colorado, which according to the American Community Survey for students making between 25 and 35 years old, high school graduates with no college degree, they make about $26,000 a year on average. That's what they make according to a 5-year survey, which basically a lot of folks use. So these folks in finance are making $35,000 a year more, cost them $115,000, $116,000 to earn their degree here. Because they're making $35,000 more, they're able to recoup that very hefty educational cost within about 3.3 years. Like, it pays off pretty quickly. I think we'd all be happy with that. It costs a lot, but you can see that you're making a lot more. Some of us would say college is totally worth it if you want to become a finance major at the University of Denver. I work with a lot of journalists, so I pick on them a lot. But journalists, like, not as good as finance in terms of strict economic ROI. But you can see about $10,000 a year more on average. $115,000, about 11.6 years, a little bit more than a decade, to recoup the cost that you paid for college in the first place. And if you want to study film or video, photography, arts at the University of Denver, a lot of these students are having a harder time meeting that minimum threshold. That's what I call it, a basic minimal economic threshold. I believe that the majority of students should be able to earn at least as much as a typical high school graduate, especially being funded by federal grants and loans. That's my perspective. Everyone might have their own perspective. A lot of folks I met here say it should be way higher than that. So I work in federal policy, and I'm saying to policymakers in my world, I'm like, this should be the minimum. This is something that we should expect. Whether you're an arts major or a film major, you should still be expecting to make more than the typical high school graduate. No one's coming in here and saying, I would love to make $6,000 less and pay $115,000 a year. The data that I present on my website, I try to take data and present it in really accessible ways so that if you all need it, or journalists need it, or institutional administrators need it, they have it. And something that's kind of cool that you can do besides looking at the data for every single college across the United States for basically every single major is you can look at the same major at different colleges, right? So if you're considering different colleges and you're thinking you want to major in political science, you can see that there's really pretty drastically different outcomes depending on where you go and how much former students make. This is 4 years after they've graduated. And that's something that I just want to emphasize a little bit more, is that these students have done everything right. They've taken their classes, they paid their tuition, they've got their degree. And we can see at University of Colorado Boulder, they're making about $60,000. This is what they're making. This isn't beyond the typical high school graduate. That's just what their median salary is. At University of Northern Colorado, it's about $45,000. So you have this information at your fingertips. And something else I want to say, just if you're a college administrator too, you can see every college program at your college. Let's just say you're a community college president. And you could see finance, sociology, English, philosophy, everything. And if you're a community college president, you have more trades like welding, elevator technician, different things like that, allied health. You can think about, okay, I can see that I have 50 programs at my institution. 35 of them are working really well. These students are meeting their ROI in 5 years or less. There's 5 of them that are, on the fringe. It takes about, between 5 and 20 years. That's something that I need to think about. But then you can see a certain amount of institutions where the majority of students aren't even earning more than a typical high school graduate. And as an administrator, number one, that's a dive deeper flag, right? You need to dive a little bit deeper. And there could be a couple reasons that's happening. Either we're not providing students with the necessary skills to succeed in the workforce. We're not offering the right curriculum. We can look at the professors to say, are they not up to snuff and not the best professors to educate our students? Or, which is often the case, are we offering credentials to where there aren't necessarily jobs in the geographic region where we're offering them? That's usually the case. But that's something for us all to think about as we think about ways to continuously improve, because that's what this should all be about. Something else that's neat about the program level data that I was showing you is you can see the types of programs and the types of ROI. If you're to sort of roll it up, look at all the registered nursing programs across the United States. This is associate's degrees, just as an example. You can look at the different types of degrees, certificate, associates, or bachelor's. You can see that almost 100% of registered nursing programs across the United States allow their students to recoup their educational costs in 5 years or less. Whose kid is becoming a nurse next year? Pretty good. You can look at this with allied health. You can look at all the different professions and see how long does it take students to recoup their educational costs on average if we were to roll that up for all institutions across the United States. It's a good starting point to figure out what kind of ROI these types of programs offer our students. Now, on the flip side, you can see the ones that are the highest proportionally to offer no ROI. So things like human development, family studies, and related services, an associate's degree, keep that in mind. 82.5% of them have the majority of students not earning more than a typical high school graduate within a few years after they graduate. Liberal arts and science, I'm a big fan of liberal arts and sciences, but if you get a 2-year degree in liberal arts and science, and you don't pursue a 4-year degree, 58% of college programs leave the majority of those students earning less than a typical high school graduate, which in Colorado, for example, is around $27,000. These are the data. This is what the US Department of Education says, and the Department of Treasury, who they work with. They get all the tax returns, they know exactly how much everyone makes, and this is just what the data say. So, okay, that's ROI. I was told I could take a few more minutes than usual. Sorry about that. But I said, okay, we have all this ROI data, and I thought, I know what it is for the typical student. But you know what? I want to know what it is for the lower income student. Not, well, how do you serve all students, but how well do you serve lower income students? They typically pay a different price, and they typically earn a different amount, right? So I ran all these numbers, and the same price to earnings premium, but for students that families make between $0 and $30,000 a year. So really our most vulnerable students. Now I ran all these numbers, and I put them into my spreadsheet, and I clicked enter, and I'm so excited. I'm like, Mike, you're the smartest guy. This is going to be amazing. And what popped up? It was schools like Duke, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and the University of Chicago. I'm like, congratulations, Mike, you just recreated the US News List, all the best resource schools in the United States. You are a genius. And go home. But I work from home, so I didn't have anywhere to go. So I started thinking, I saw this number next to it, and it was the number of Pell Grant students. And if you guys know anything about Pell Grant students, they're typically students that make less than $75,000 a year, oftentimes way less than that. And I saw this number, the percentage of Pell Grant students next to these other numbers. And I noticed they're almost all less than 25%. They're almost all less than 20%. So I started thinking about economic mobility, and I started thinking, what's the point of higher education in general? Is it to really recognize and reward the institutions that are the most well-resourced and provide the highest research in the United States year after year? Should we give them the certificate of excellence for letting in the best students and serving them really well? Or is the purpose of higher education to ultimately lift this generation up and leave them better off than the previous generation? So that's what I was thinking about. And I said, okay, how do I do this? What can I do with these numbers? There's a gentleman, a professor at Harvard by the name of Raj Chetty. He's done some work on intergenerational mobility. And he found, he looked at students that moved up from the bottom quintile to the top quintile. And I thought about, okay, I have this data. How can I account for students that not only serve a lot of lower moderate income students, but also serve them really, really well? Those are the types of institutions that I'm interested in. And who's doing the work? So the way that I did this is schools like Harvard and Yale and Duke, they're at the top of the list, right? I gave them all a percentile rank. They still get 100%. if you get in there, if you're one of the many, if the few, a lower moderate income student, you're going to be doing extremely well. You're going to get the best ROI. You're going to get the best scholarships. Doesn't cost a lot, but there's not many of you. If you got in anywhere, you'd probably do really well. But I still reward you by saying, if you got in there, you're on the 100th percentile. If you're school B, you're in the 75th percentile in this example. School C, I gave you a 50th percentile. You're the school right in the middle, right? So I did this for 1,320 institutions across the United States. But then I took the percentage of Pell Grant students into account, and I said, let me create an index, multiply that percentile rank by the percentage of Pell Grant students and create an index called the Economic Mobility Index. And this can help answer that question in a way that says, what are the schools that are allowing a lot of lower and moderate income students in, but also serving them really well? So what happened when I did this? You see the US News list on the left, but schools like Harvard that were number 4 in ROI, if you get in and you're a low income student, you're gonna get the 4th best return in the nation. When you take lower and moderate income students into account, you drop to number 847. If you're University of Chicago, who scored number 8 in terms of how well you serve low income students, low and moderate income students, you take the proportion that you actually serve into account, you drop to number 860. Now, who rose to the top of the list when I did this? It happened to be all Hispanic serving institutions. Those are institutions that enroll more than 25% of Latino students, and the top 10 all happened to be Hispanic serving institutions specifically located in New York, California, and Texas. Schools like HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, they're usually nowhere to be found in US News, right? There's 100 of them across the nation. US News, nowhere to be found. But a lot of them have been delivering on this promise for years. 7 of them actually popped up to the top 100. Right? So these are schools that are under-resourced oftentimes, but are giving an effective and efficient education to low and moderate income students, lifting them up through the socioeconomic ladder and actually leaving them better off. So, okay, cool. I created a list. That's all I did, right? Just joking. But essentially, I created a list, 1 through 1,320 for 4-year institutions. And that's where Harvard fell 847, Chicago fell 860. And I started thinking, okay, everyone loves a list, right? We all click on it. Top 10 best colleges, top 10 places to eat in Denver. Right? So we like that. And we see number 1 and number 10 and number 20. And I started thinking, the number 10 school in the United States in terms of providing economic mobility, they're not twice as good as the number 20 school. Like, they're both pretty darn good, right? So yes, we have numbers, but if you're thinking about this in a way to use this for continuous improvement, like the number 10 and the number 20 school, they're both really good. They're a tier 1 school. So I kind of just divided them up into 5 different tiers so we can have an easier idea of where these schools fall in terms of economic mobility. And as we're working towards this, I think that that's a better way to look at it. And schools that are also in a lower tier can look at schools with a higher tier with similar demographics and think about, how do I learn from them? They have the same demographics, but they have better outcomes. So it's a way for us to partner together and think about continuous improvement and change in higher education. All that being said, I have a lot of this information available on my website, which is the heagroup.com. I make everything available. So I'm not hiding this data. This is for everyone to have, and I hope it's helpful and that you can use it in your own way. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Either we're very scared or empowered by so much data. And I wish I knew you when my son was trying to figure out where to go to school about 4 years ago. It would have been better for my spreadsheet. So exciting times. We're in for the closer today, which is Gina with Google. And I want to say this is one topic that's really important to the folks I represent at Colorado Business Roundtable. In fact, at my last board meeting, getting ready for this event, they kept asking, how is AI going to disrupt how they're planning for the future in terms of their workforce? How is it going to disrupt their supply chain? How is it going to disrupt everything they do, for good and for bad? So we're excited to hear from Gina today on some of the topics she's dealing with every day. So I want to introduce officially Gina Fraticangelli. How did I do? is the managing director at Google, helping Fortune 500 companies solve unsolvable problems and creating first-of-its-kind solutions. She spends her days working with CXOs and cross-Google teams focusing on cloud and AI. She is known as a thought leader in the tech and cloud space, with a career that also includes Accenture, Genpact, and IBM. In her spare time, she's also a tremendous golfer and surfer. So help me welcome, as our closing speaker today, Gina Fraticongelli.
Debbie's seen me golf and it's not spectacular, but I have fun. I have fun. Hi, folks. Thanks so much for being here. And I've really enjoyed listening and learning so much on the topic today. And I do want to thank the speakers who have already gone. There was some great content in there, and I think really relevant stuff for what's going on in our universe today and impacting some of the points I wanted to talk about. Steve talking about looking for those pedigree, past the pedigree of skills, past the pedigree to the skills that folks have. So critical, I feel, in the workspace. Eve with the call to action to really drive the change. Thierry with, being so open and honest and helping open our eyes. Thank you to the struggle that so many are facing and providing visibility into the changes. So thank you. Helen had a great, there was that panel up here was just spectacular at the whole widen the pathway to prosperity. I'm like, oh, that's such a great soundbite. And Michelle with the comment that critical thinking is so critical. I can't stress this enough as I get into what I'm going to talk about here in a second. AI is going to do a lot of the stuff for you. What we need is a workforce of critical thinkers and people willing to process that. And I really firmly believe you get so much of that from a college experience. So that was great. And then Carla, just walking the walk in the private sector with real change. I don't know where Carla went, but awesome, awesome, awesome. So thank you, folks, and thank you for having me here. And I didn't learn how to work my clicker, but I'm sure I'll figure it out as we go in here. As we were talking about the future of work, I thought we'd spend some time talking about how AI is going to impact that workforce. And it's been such an exciting journey for me right now, being alive in this time right now and what we're seeing. It reminds me back, I'm old, but there's a few old folks like me in the room. So back in 1996, and I had to present to the board of a large bank about what the internet was and how this internet company that I was working for, what it was going to be. And so I did a whole presentation, and at the end, this cute little old man in the back of the room, after like an hour and a half, goes, "So the internet, what is it exactly?" I'm like, oh my God, I just spoke for an hour and a half and that's where we still are? Okay, back to page one. But last week I was on the flight sitting next to an executive director of Goldman Sachs and had an amazing conversation on lots of topics, got into AI, and he said, "What is AI?" I'm like, okay, that's where we are. Like, we are at a fundamental transformation thing, and it's going to be so impactful to so many people. And what I wanted to share with you today, kind of get a read of the room. How many of you feel like you have a grip on what AI is? Well, that's pretty impressive. How many feel that they've got a grip on how AI is going to impact their business? A few less hands. How many feel that they know how AI is going to impact their customers? Yeah, even fewer hands. And the reason is that hands kind of came down as we went through that process is it's all happening so fast and changing so incredibly quickly. And the thing I want to say is, kind of don't panic. There's so much happening and happening so fast that hold on for the ride is kind of the takeaway from this note and how we go through it. I work at Google. I read probably 5 to 10. I probably receive 5 to 10 different newsletters each day on the topic. I probably spend about 2 hours a day reading and researching, inside and outside of my organization, and there's just a ton going on. So if I work at Google and I feel stressed out about it, don't worry about it. You'll have plenty of time to catch up. And you are not too far behind. As leaders of your businesses and companies, it is happening. I feel like we're in about the first inning, well, maybe the second inning of it, but you're all coming up quickly. And I fundamentally believe that AI is going to be the enabler that helps us all work better, faster, smarter, and spend less time on menial tasks. More on that in a little bit. Let's take a look at what industry leaders are saying. Steve highlighted a few things here, and we've talked about a couple of the reports and the information that's out there right now. What I chose a couple of different quotes here just to give the yin and yang of it, right? As we see that a large portion of jobs may go away, even more jobs will be being created. And I want to break out jobs and tasks separately, and we'll come back to that in a second here. But there's a tremendous amount of energy in the system, and what we're seeing in the space, both US and foreign policies, and how we're all going to take it. And I think slow and steady is the way everyone should be starting to think about taking it. One comment Steve made as well is we need new kinds of skills and new kinds of workers. And I think that's just so critical to it. So you're seeing all the headlines. I'm feeling the headlines too. And there is uncertainty in the space for both you and your employees and the service providers who provide services in the space. AI will impact tasks, not occupations. So we talked about the skills, but I really feel that this is a critical nuance in how we think about the learning that we're going through and where you spend your time and energy. Accenture just put out a recent study that I thought was really important here, and I want to read this because it was good. Companies must reinvent work to find a path to generative AI value. Business leaders must lead the change starting now in job redesign, task redesign, and reskilling people. Ultimately, every role in an enterprise has the potential to be reinvented once today's jobs are decomposed into tasks that can be automated or assisted and reimagined for a new future of human plus machine work. We should expect tasks and the task impact somewhere between 10 and 60%. So your workers are feeling it. They know there's going to be change in the space, and we as leaders need to keep driving that. I did close on that. And BCG came out with a report as well that 43% of workers feel that there will be change. So as leaders, how do we start thinking about AI? What is AI and what is not AI? It's important to understand that AI is only as good as the corpus data, which is the base data that it's pulling the knowledge from. So I'm going to talk more about that in a second, but keep that in your head. And then AI does not learn. AI does not think. It learns and predicts. It predicts what's going to be the next best word or action based on how the strings of words or characters are being put together and how they've been previously put together. So think of it as an incredibly sophisticated autocomplete, right? Based on the data you have shared with it, it is going to make a decision and give you the next best action or comment from what it's heard. It's incredibly good at correlation, less good at causation. And it is just a tool. So as you begin to explore AI, you should think about it as another tool for your employees to do their job. And you should think about it conceptually in terms of what are the tasks that can be optimized by pattern recognition in your business. Because humans are great at pattern recognition, right? And as we talk about the skills to learn, all those cognitive developments, humans are great at pattern recognition, but at a small scale. And so as the data increases, humans just simply can't process the volume of pattern recognition that a computer can, and what computers are using and how AI is doing that. So what AI is now doing is giving companies the ability to process huge volumes of data in ways that they've never been able to do in the past. And not just processing the data, but most importantly, nearly instantaneously using that data to give you practical information and insights and helping you have peripheral vision that you may not have been able to have before. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Kind of shedding a little light on it? Yeah? Okay. So I get super passionate and start nerding out on stuff. And some of my Google colleagues are here who get nerdy with me, so it's fun. But we get excited about the potential because my company, as well as many other companies, are just cracking the surface on where we're headed and what all is going to happen with the process. So where are we headed? Well, there's a ton of companies in this space, and this is by no means exhausted, but I wanted to just ground you in maybe some of the terms and names of companies you're hearing and companies who may be calling on you and asking for help or asking you to buy their products and services. So I want to take a second as you think about the Brave New World and in the context of the data, how you start thinking about the data and the companies who are going to be supporting you in that data journey, right? Super important to have good, clean data. And as you think about your data, most studies show that to truly optimize your data, you have to think about it from both a cost and a functionality perspective. And the right thing to be doing is storing your data in the cloud. As AI processing starts, I'm sure you're hearing in the news right now, compute data costs, data storage costs, data compute costs are going to keep going up and up and up. So important as you start scaling and starting to think about using AI, there's going to be impacts. So getting your data ready. So the group of hyperscalers there, all those folks can help you in that space. And why is this important to the AI? Why is this perspective important to the overall AI story? It's because the AI is only as good as the data it runs on. So it's critical to have good, clean, safe, well-organized, and integrated data. And all these hyperscalers you see on that chart have access to tons of data for you. And figuring out how to best use that data and apply it to your business can be really important. And they have access to something called large language models. And a lot of these players in the space are aggregating those large language models so that you have more data, clean, safe data to pull from and do your processing and optimization of your content. So lots of folks in the space providing you lots of data, lots of startups shaping up. I encourage you as you're thinking about partnership and vendor selection and what that's going to look like and how you start thinking about your business, asking the real critical questions on how secure is that data? How are they going to ensure your company's data doesn't get seen by other folks? Also importantly, we were talking last night a little bit, how do they ensure that the insights that you are gleaning and the reports and the processing that you are generating from your data aren't shared out in the space too? And there's things like ChatGPT that are for consumers and Bard, and then there's enterprise grade products. Make sure that your companies are looking at enterprise grade products that are going to keep your data safe and protected. Okay, so that's a little bit on sharing those logos and how to think about that. So as you think about kind of the wild west of it all swirling around you, I'd like to put it in 3 simple buckets of, I get asked all the time by executives, what should we do? How should we get started in this? And I'll spend a few minutes with you on that here. I like to break it down pretty simply in 3 simple: educate, empower, and experiment. So what are we going to talk about there? First, in educate, obviously a big theme for the day here too, as we think about the different ways you're going to educate yourself. Who should get educated on the topic of AI? Everyone. Everyone in your organization should be learning, should be researching how AI is going to impact their job, how it's going to impact their industry, how it's going to impact your customers. So it is going to change how your work is done, and we as leaders need to be creating a new culture of folks who are getting curious about AI. So challenging your teams to think about how it's going to impact their employee experience and your customers' experience. Create a culture of curiosity on the topic. Support and fund this education as well. Good news is there is a ton of free information out there, and a preposterous amount of free stuff out there. I've got a slide at the end that gives you a couple of links to stuff that you can go do, but there's super nerdy techie stuff and there's super business-minded kind of content as well, just as you're ramping up and learning. So helping you get smart on all of that. Encourage your teams to do that and use these curriculums. Also start training your tech departments. Challenge them to upskill on AI. Think about how it's going to be used, whether it's Google or any of the other products out there. There's 1,000,001 certifications that they can be doing and learning in the space, and know how it's going to impact your tech environment and how you need to get your data ready. Support and fund continuous learning. So from your marketing department to your finance department, to your sales, to your customer engineering departments, AI is going to change how they do everything. So make sure they know it's a priority, that you want them on a continuous learning journey. And then curate content. This is something I feel super passionate about. There's so much out there. You as the leaders of your company know what is important to your company. So be the one at your company who starts curating AI content and sharing the information across folks. Being a curator of content is really important in the marketplace. The landscape's changing quickly, we're all learning. So disseminating case studies that are applicable to you or your customers. See what your competitors are doing. If you haven't started playing around, it's phenomenal, all the stuff you can do out there right now. Next, empower. Empower your teams. Help them learn about the AI topics and start getting out there exploring. As I mentioned early, it's going to be about maximizing your data and your value of your data. But I urge a tremendous amount of caution as it relates to the security of your data and making sure that your tech departments are spending the time and understanding the importance of security about your data before anyone gets out there, and making sure you're using enterprise versions of AI within your companies. It's critical you ask the question for any vendor, how are you going to be securing that data? Next, fostering communication across the departments. This AI, unlike any other thing I've seen, I've been in consulting, I've been in technology, I've been a lot of different companies, is going to require cross-communication across silos of work functions. So getting folks together to be able to understand how and what they want to accomplish is going to be critical. This cross-departmental collaboration, and what we're seeing more in this space than ever before is really use case design in coming up with the strategies and solutions that people are going to use. So I also get asked a lot, what are the most common use cases that people are seeing so far in the AI space? The leaders right now, as it relates to our perspective, are code generation for software engineers. We were talking last night, I met up with another person from Stanford, and she was saying, yeah, anyone who didn't graduate software engineering before was thought, what are you doing in the space? But now we're going to see a lot less work required by software engineers because the APIs that you can use via AI are going to do so much of that coding. You can just tell it what you want it to do in plain language, and it's going to do that. So people ask me, what should my kid go study? I say critical thinking, but understanding data is also a very big one as well. Sales and marketing, content and creation, giving you the opportunity to try out a lot of different versions and variables from a marketing message and visual perspective. Internal company search. This is one that we're having a lot of fun with. Someone made the comment earlier, right? Software engineers spend half their time just trying to find where the data is. Now with internal company search, the volume of time you spend looking for stuff has gone away. And then lengthy document summarization. You're hearing a lot about this in the legal fields and financial services fields, being able to boil down and get a concise summary very quickly from a lot of content. So lots of fun out in the space. And that's today. I can't even imagine what tomorrow will be. And that leads into the experiment portion of this. So 18% of CFOs said they will add new investments to experiment with AI in the future, to which I say, great, let's keep that number going up. Because if I look at the first initial easy use cases, I think what we're going to be seeing is that there are cost-cutting opportunities in there. And CFOs in the room, or people who get the joy of working with CFOs, know they love to look for that. And this is a gold mine of cost cutting to see what can be eliminated from that process. So looking at your organization, assessing your organizational readiness from all aspects of it is super critical. Do you have the right data to accomplish the use cases you want? What other data would be required to achieve those use cases? How do you ensure safety and quality within those data sets? And how do you ensure safety and confidentiality of the outputs? So get that safe environment created and then start experimenting. It is just a lot of fun, and it really is playful once you've got the space set up. And I encourage companies to dream big, but start small. It is going to iterate incredibly fast, but start small so you can see if there's any big concerns in the system. And then establishing a system of prioritization of the use cases you want to do, also good so that it aligns with your corporate metrics. One fear we're seeing is that it turns into the Wild West internally as well. And so you want to put some parameters in place early, get some corporate guidelines in terms of how they can and should be using AI. Start working on those low-hanging fruit, quick win opportunities, and they will have fun, I know it. And then also a cross-functional steering committee. Just get that established early. There's going to be slow and steady change in your organization because it is going to make some pivots. Get the leadership on board working together to be thinking through those. And have fun. So how do you get started? There's 1,000,001 resources out there. You'll be drowning in stuff. I'm putting up a few of my favorites here. Myself is my favorite. No. I do curate a ton of content, and I've got a whole team of folks that work with me to also be curated, and then I pick and boil it down. But podcasts that I really like: This Week in AI, Last Week in AI. Last week is some Stanford PhDs, and they boil down a ton more articles. They make it easy for you. There's some great folks out there that I follow. TLDR AI is a newsletter that comes out if you prefer to get stuff in email. It's going to be a constant drip of information. The first few times you read it, you're going to say, what the heck is all this stuff? But hang in there, keep going, think Internet 1996, and there's going to be so much to learn. And then learning, and the learning modules and the skill sets. Those are just a couple of resources for you, but there is a ton. Microsoft has a ton, Google has, everyone has a ton. And some are aligned for technical folks and some are aligned for business folks. So I highly encourage you to get out there and enjoy what is going to be an exciting time in the universe and very impactful to our workforce. So hopefully that was helpful. I know I was talking fast, but thank you for listening. And if I can help you in any way, let me know.
And I wasn't going to give away your golf score. That was our secret. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're just going to wrap up with a couple last remarks. On behalf of the Colorado Business Roundtable, I want to say workforce is our #1 issue. As I mentioned, we actually bring together our executives and CEOs around a workforce pillar. I want to recognize Dave Shunk. He doesn't know I'm going to do that. He chairs our workforce pillar. He's also the president of Volunteers of America. I also want to thank Chris Schmidt if he's in the room today. He's the managing partner with Deloitte, who chairs our board. So we've got a lot of great folks in the community who build with us what we're doing along workforce. Our vision is building a tomorrow-ready workforce requires modernizing training pipelines, embracing technology, and strengthening post-secondary education options so Colorado's youth and working adults can secure fulfilling jobs and sustainable career pathways. So that's a lot. Today was one piece of that collaboration that we're going to take from all of you, but our work is continual, and we invite you to be a part of it. I was really struck by Michael's comments today because we think in terms of ROI, relevancy, and speed when we come to the table to think about workforce training. Those are areas that are critical, and those sound like business terms for those of you in the business world, and how we can apply, how do we help people achieve their dreams faster. Some of our examples in the state have included being a part of the 1330 task force, involved in stackable credentials, the Opportunity Now grants, and a handful of other ways where, whether it's Cobert specifically or our partners, we're involved in really long-term strategic planning along workforce pathways here in the state. We also work on federal issues that are important to our folks, including immigration, finding ways to modernize immigration strategies to help more people get into the workforce and find their path as well. One of the things that we put at your table today that I just want to draw your attention to briefly is a little bit of a highlight of what the private sector is already doing. Private sector, some government agencies already doing within workforce. I think there's a good story to be told how people are already leaning in and engaging in a really impactful way. You'll see through the Career Choice program, a little bit about what Amazon is doing to build investing in their workforce, $1.2 billion by 2025, where their employees get an opportunity to go to college paid for by Amazon. You'll see an example of Lockheed Martin's Advanced Manufacturing Technician Apprentice Program, which someone with a high school degree and no experience can actually apply and receive pay and benefits on day one and have the opportunity to be trained to be impactful in the space industry. Other examples, again, at your table from MSU Denver, RK Industries, and others, St. Vrain Valley School District, Colorado Workforce Development Council, and more. So we like to amplify the good work that's already happening in our space, but that's no ending to the good work that needs to happen. So we invite you to also lean in with us, and we're honored that Colorado Succeeds was our partner this year on this event, but we want to be a part of what's next in that big picture collaboration. Some upcoming roundtables to bring to your attention now that you're on our email list. You can always opt out, but I don't know that you want to. We are having a roundtable on immigration modernization coming up with some of our folks looking into some ways that states can be more involved in helping to find work pathways, which will be exciting. We also have an event coming up around good jobs that is a new prioritization of the Department of Labor on the federal side that'll impact employers and employees alike. That'll be coming up in November. And then we have another big event similar to this called View from the Top, which we do every year, which is a CEO panel. This year, I don't know if you saw the announcement, it has all the heads of the major sports teams here in Colorado talking about the business of sports. So if you're a sports fan and want to see kind of under the covers of what they do to build global brands, how they meet their workforce needs, I think it'll be really interesting to have that happen. That'll be in September. So invite you to be a part of that. So finally, I just want to say again, on behalf of Colorado Business Roundtable, we want to work together, we want to be collaborative and work on issues that really fit that lens of ROI, relevancy, and speed. Because at the end of the day, when businesses succeed here in Colorado, it certainly helps individuals, it helps our communities. And we're really aligned about the dignity of work and wanting to make sure everybody has a path to success. So appreciate you all being here today, and I want to turn it over to Scott for final remarks. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
So I know we throw a lot at you today, so I'll be very brief. Really grateful for the opportunity to connect with you today. There's been so many amazing speakers who have shared their story, their vision, and their ideas for how to move our state forward. But we also know that a lot of those ideas and vision live within the heads of all of you out here in the audience, and that there are so many great things that you are moving forward in your work. And so I just open an invitation to connection and an idea that hopefully we can get more done together. I really fundamentally believe that we are at a unique moment in time right now because of the energy that is around this conversation, because of the leadership that we have at all levels of business, civic, and community engagement in our state. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and I hope that you're walking away from the conversation today feeling that sense of optimism. I hope you're walking away feeling like you have learned something new, hatched a new idea, or maybe met a new colleague or friend who might help you continue to move those ideas forward. And most importantly, I hope that we can continue to stay in communication with each other. And so we invite all of you to join us in ongoing conversations on this topic and others. We'll be sending out an email with ways that might align with your interests and ours, and we just ask that you be in touch with us as those seem like a good fit for you. So again, thank you for today, and thank you for your time. Be well, travel safe, and take care.